Billionaire hires a nanny for his sick daughter, but the truth about the nanny shocks everyone. What happens next changes their lives forever. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Marcus Sterling stared out the tall windows of his Boston mansion as dusk fell over the meticulously groomed gardens. The air carried a tense stillness he couldn't shake, a reminder of life's precarious balance. For all his vast fortune, he was, after all, a billionaire investor whose name graced business magazines. He had never felt more powerless. His 7-year-old daughter, Lily, lay in the adjacent room, fighting a rare immunological disorder that seemed to defy even the most advanced treatments. Marcus, in his mid-40s, stood tall with shoulders that had once carried confidence but now held a perpetual weight. His hair showed faint streaks of grey, and the deep lines around his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. No matter how many solutions he sought, the hush in Lily's bedroom reminded him of the fragility money couldn't mend. He walked down the hallway to check on her again. Each step resonated against marble floors until he reached a door adorned with a small brass plaque bearing Lily's name. Inside, the walls were painted a soft lavender, designed to soothe her during long convalescences. Lily, a delicate child with wispy blonde hair, had fallen asleep after another exhausting day of hospital visits and medical tests. Watching her breathe, Marcus felt a pang of guilt. He should have been able to protect her. That was the promise he'd made to his late wife, Elizabeth, gone now for 3 years. The memory of Elizabeth still clung to every corner of this home. The faint scent of her favorite lilac perfume in their old bedroom, the portraits in the study capturing her graceful smile. Yet no memory was more haunting than how swiftly she had been taken from him. He had never fully understood the details of her death, the doctor's explanations, the frantic hospital runs. All of it still felt like an unsolved storm that upended his world. Quietly closing Lily's door, he returned to his study, where the family's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Henley, waited. A woman of 60, with silver hair neatly pinned back, she had served the Sterlings for decades. Her voice carried the warmth of a caretaker's heart. "Marcus," she said gently, "any update from the specialists?" He gave a weary sigh. "They say Lily needs around-the-clock attention. The new treatment is promising, but complicated. They recommend a specialized caregiver or a live-in nurse." Mrs. Henley nodded, empathy lining her face. "We'll find someone capable. Lily deserves the best." Marcus rubbed his temples. "But it's not just about qualifications, Mrs. Henley. She needs someone with compassion, someone who can make her feel safe." As if on cue, Gregory Mathis, Marcus's efficient assistant, entered the study. At 35, Gregory possessed a composed air and had served the Sterling family for nearly a decade. "Sir," he began, holding a folder, "I've contacted several agencies. We'll have interviews by the end of the week. I'll forward the details to you." Marcus merely nodded. The tension in his shoulders didn't lessen. Once, his greatest worries had been market fluctuations or boardroom rivalries. Now, he was fighting for his daughter's life. No board meeting or negotiation had ever felt as high stakes as this. Meanwhile, across town, in a modest apartment near Boston's downtown, Claire Thompson studied a letter with trembling hands. It was from a private investigator she had hired months ago, back when her curiosity about her birth family had become overwhelming. The investigator's research hinted that she might be connected to a wealthy Boston family named Sterling, specifically to a woman named Elizabeth Sterling, who had died a few years back. There were details about Elizabeth's time in college, a possibility that Elizabeth's parents had given up another child for adoption decades earlier. The words on the page swirled in Claire's mind, igniting a confusing mixture of longing and fear. Claire was 29, with medium-length brown hair and thoughtful green eyes. She worked as a professional nanny, known for her kindness and patience with children. Yet she carried a deep restlessness, a sense of not quite belonging. She had grown up in foster homes, bouncing from one family to another until finally being adopted at age 10. While she cherished her adoptive parents, the unknown remained a quiet ache in her life. Who were her biological relatives? Why had she been separated from them? Setting the letter aside, Claire picked up her phone to check her messages. There, almost like a sign, was a job posting forwarded by a friend. Full-time, live-in caregiver needed for a young girl in Boston. Urgent. She read through the details, heart pounding. The listed address matched the name she'd just discovered in the investigator's report. Sterling. Breath quickening. She wondered if this was fate. Dare she apply? A chance to piece together her past, to learn more about this Elizabeth Sterling, potentially a sister she'd never known. But what if it was too personal, too risky? She pushed aside her uncertainty long enough to draft a concise email applying for the position. It felt surreal, but a quiet resolve took shape inside her. If there was any possibility that she and Elizabeth were connected by blood, Claire needed to find answers. Unaware of the secret that would soon enter his household, Marcus ended his night with a solitary vigil in his study, going over Lily's medical reports. Outside, the sky darkened, the first stars flickering in the distance, a silent reminder that even in darkness, there could be small points of light. In two very different parts of Boston, both Marcus and Claire were on the brink of a discovery that would upend everything they thought they knew. 2 days later, the Sterling mansion bustled with unusual commotion. Gregory had arranged a series of interviews for the live-in caregiver position, and Marcus, though hesitant, knew it was necessary. He had spent the morning by Lily's side while she slept, her feverish cheeks revealing just how tenuous her condition remained. Her soft breathing lulled him into a state of worry that overshadowed all else. Outside Lily's room, Mrs. Henley directed the housekeeping staff to keep the atmosphere as calm and quiet as possible. Despite the grandeur of the marble halls and polished antique furniture, the house felt like a sanctuary for delicate hope. In the main foyer, several candidates waited, portfolios in hand, shifting uncomfortably in the presence of wealth. Gregory greeted each with polite efficiency. Claire arrived last, slightly out of breath. She wore a modest blazer over a simple blouse, trying to appear professional yet approachable. Her heart pounded at the sight of the grand entranceway, towering columns, a sweeping staircase, all testaments to a life that felt worlds apart from her modest beginnings. Gregory gave her a brisk handshake. "Ms. Thompson, correct? You're right on time. If you'll follow me, we'll begin shortly." She noted the line of other candidates sitting on a plush bench, flipping through resumes, but from their muted expressions, she guessed many had already been dismissed. Maybe Marcus Sterling was incredibly selective. Her nerves fluttered, but she reminded herself this is more than a job interview. As Gregory led her through the corridor, Claire's eyes flickered over the artwork lining the walls. One painting, a portrait of a striking blonde woman with a gentle smile, made Claire pause. Could that be Elizabeth, the woman who might have been her sister? "Ms. Thompson," Gregory prompted, snapping her back to the moment. She followed him into a spacious sitting room where Marcus stood near a large window. Sunlight poured over his shoulders, highlighting the silver at his temples. He turned to face her, his gaze cool and assessing. Claire felt a ripple of tension. Something about his posture spoke of both authority and exhaustion. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "it's a pleasure to meet you." He gave a curt nod. "Please, have a seat. Gregory, you can stay." Claire set her purse down and sat on an elegant love seat. Marcus, remaining standing, glanced at a folder in his hands. "Your references are excellent, Miss Thompson. You have experience working with children who have special medical needs." "Yes," Claire replied, measuring her voice. "I spent a year at a pediatric care center in New York, then worked for 2 families whose children had chronic conditions. My role was to ensure their daily routines, medications and therapies were all maintained. I'm also comfortable coordinating with healthcare professionals." His expression softened a fraction. "That's precisely what Lily needs. She's quite ill, and we require someone who can devote full attention to her. Lily's condition is rare, so it demands vigilance." Claire nodded. "I understand how crucial it is. I'll do everything in my power to help her heal and feel supported." For a moment, Marcus studied her, searching her face as though trying to detect any hidden motive. Claire held her breath, hoping to project sincerity, all while her heart raced at the knowledge she hadn't revealed, the possibility she was connected to his deceased wife. Gregory cleared his throat. "Lily's well-being is paramount. Are you comfortable relocating here indefinitely?" Claire hesitated, only for a split second. The idea of living under the same roof as the man who could be her brother-in-law, if her suspicions were correct, intimidated her. Yet she reminded herself this was her chance to learn the truth. "Yes," she finally answered. "I'm prepared to move in immediately." Marcus remained silent, eyes flicking to Gregory before returning to Claire. His expression betrayed concern and a hint of something else, relief maybe. "We've had other applicants," he began, "but none with the exact skill set Lily needs. You seem well-suited." Claire offered a small smile. "Thank you." Before the conversation could proceed, the door opened and Mrs. Henley stepped in. "Sir, Lily's awake. She's asking for you." Marcus stiffened. "Interview's over for now," he said abruptly. "I'll be upstairs." Gregory escorted Claire out, politely indicating she should wait in the foyer. As Claire passed by the portrait of Elizabeth again, she felt an odd pang of recognition. There was an echo of her own features in the woman's face, or so she convinced herself. The notion both frightened and compelled her. In the foyer, she resumed her seat on the bench, looking at the polished marble floors. Thoughts swirled. If Elizabeth Sterling really was the sibling she'd never known, how was she to gather more information without betraying the trust of this family? The footsteps in the distance, the hush of staff going about their tasks, all pressed in on her. After several minutes, Gregory returned, a neutral expression on his face. "Ms. Thompson," he said, offering a handshake. "Mr. Sterling wants to offer you the position. He'd like you to begin as soon as possible." Claire's breath caught in her throat. It was happening. She was about to step into the orbit of a family that might be hers. "I'll take it," she answered, forcing composure even as her mind spun. Claire arrived at the Sterling mansion early on her first official day. She carried a single suitcase and a small collection of childhood photos, tucked away in an envelope at the bottom of her bag. A wave of uncertainty threatened to overwhelm her as she stepped inside the silent foyer, where a faint scent of fresh lilies draped the air. Mrs. Henley greeted her with a motherly smile. "Welcome. We've prepared the guest suite on the second floor for you." "Thank you. I'm grateful for this opportunity," Claire replied, noticing the shift in her own voice. It sounded more reserved than usual, as though she were walking a tightrope. On one side, she wanted to show genuine care for Lily, and on the other, she wrestled with her suspicion that she was Elizabeth's long-lost sister. The morning began quietly. Gregory showed Claire around, demonstrating where Lily's medication was stored and pointing out the schedule pinned to the kitchen bulletin board. Lily's treatment regimen was daunting. Precise meal times, immunotherapy sessions, daily monitoring of her vital signs. Yet Claire felt a surge of determination. She had handled complex cases before, and Lily was the reason she had come. Everything else, the secrets, the questions, the potential heartbreak, took a back seat whenever she thought of Lily's fragile state. When Lily finally woke, Claire found her in a cozy bedroom painted a gentle lavender. The little girl sat propped up by pillows, her face still pale, but her eyes curious. A worn teddy bear rested in her lap. She looked more delicate than Claire remembered from their brief meeting during the interview. "Hi, Lily," Claire said softly, pulling up a chair. "I'm Claire. I'll be helping your dad take care of you." Lily's gaze flickered with uncertainty. "Why are you here?" Her voice was small, yet direct. Claire smiled, keeping her tone warm. "Your dad said you're a little under the weather, and he wanted someone to make sure you're comfortable and safe. I'm good at taking care of kids." Lily clutched her teddy bear. "I miss my mom. She used to stay by my bed too." Claire's heart tightened. Elizabeth's absence was a constant ache in this child's life. "I know," she managed. "I wish I could have met her. I'm sure she was very special." The girl nodded solemnly. "She was. Dad doesn't talk about her much, though." Before Claire could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. His eyes met Claire's for a moment, a flicker of discomfort, perhaps at overhearing Lily mention Elizabeth. His expression softened when he turned to his daughter. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" "I'm okay," Lily said. "Claire was telling me she's going to help." "That's right," Marcus replied, walking to Lily's bedside and adjusting her blanket. "Claire will be here every day. She'll make sure you take your medicine, and she'll help you with whatever you need." Lily looked from her father to Claire. "Can I call you Claire Bear?" she asked suddenly, holding up her own teddy bear. "Because you're taking care of me, like a bear takes care of her cubs." Claire laughed softly, touched by the child's earnestness. "Sure, Lily, I'd like that." Marcus watched the exchange with what seemed like relief. For a moment, his polished exterior fell away, revealing a father desperate for hope. Still, Claire sensed the tension that lurked beneath. He cleared his throat. "I'll be in my study if either of you need anything." After he left, Lily sank back against her pillows. "He's worried all the time now," she confided. "Ever since Mom died. It's like he's afraid to smile." Claire wanted to comfort her, but any conversation about Elizabeth felt loaded. She reached out and gently squeezed Lily's hand. "He cares so much about you." Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to show their feelings when they're scared. In the hallway, the conversation with Lily echoed in Claire's mind. A swirl of guilt nagged at her. She wasn't just here to help Lily, but also to investigate her own possible connection to Elizabeth. What if Marcus discovered her motive? Would he see it as a betrayal? Questions circled, each one deeper than the last. Later that afternoon, Claire found a moment alone in the kitchen while Lily took a nap. Mrs. Henley had prepared sandwiches and tea, inviting Claire to sit at the small table near the windows. "You've made a good impression on Lily," Mrs. Henley remarked. "It's been so long since I've seen her smile." Claire took a sip of tea, grateful for the warmth. "She's a lovely child. I just want to do my best for her." Mrs. Henley nodded but watched Claire carefully. "I do hope you feel comfortable here. If there's anything you need or if you have any concerns, you come to me, all right? This house can be complicated at times." The older woman's gentle gaze felt both reassuring and probing, as if she suspected there was more to Claire's story. Choosing her words carefully, Claire replied, "I appreciate that. I won't hesitate to ask." Yet inside, she wrestled with her conscience. She had stepped into this role quietly, carrying a hidden motive. The photograph in her suitcase, a single image of a newborn baby, rumored to be her, taken decades ago, suddenly felt like the weight of a world she wasn't sure she was ready to reveal. On her third day at the mansion, Claire woke before sunrise. The moment she opened her eyes, a sense of urgency prickled through her. She tiptoed into Lily's room to check the child's temperature and administer morning medication. Although Lily stirred briefly, she quickly drifted back to sleep. Her tiny brow was damp with perspiration, and her shallow breaths hinted at lingering fragility. Downstairs, the aroma of coffee greeted Claire. She found Marcus in the kitchen, dressed in a tailored suit, leaning against the counter with a cup in hand. Dark circles rimmed his eyes. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Morning," Claire replied. She opened the fridge to retrieve Lily's medication, feeling Marcus's gaze on her. It was the first time they had been alone since she started the job. Usually, Mrs. Henley or Gregory were nearby, buffering the tension. Marcus cleared his throat. "How is she?" "She's stable, but I'd like Dr. Winston to take another look. Her breathing seemed a bit strained last night." He set down his mug abruptly. "I'll arrange it, whatever Lily needs." Claire watched him for a moment, noticing how his shoulders hunched as though carrying an invisible burden. "Marcus," she said softly, "you should try to get some rest yourself. Lily senses when you're stressed." He offered a tight, reluctant nod. "I know, but my work is demanding. The board is pressuring me for answers on a potential merger, and with Lily's health—" He paused, running a hand through his hair. "There's no simple fix." Claire thought of telling him it was okay to slow down, but she sensed it wasn't her place to give paternal advice. Instead, she mustered a comforting smile. "Well, I'm here to lighten the load. Let me handle what I can with Lily." "Thank you," he murmured, then checked his watch. "I have to get to the office. Call me if anything changes." As he left, the familiar hush of the house returned. Claire carried Lily's meds upstairs, reflecting on her conversation with Marcus. Beneath that stern exterior was a father desperate to save his child. Her conscience pricked again. Would it break him to learn she was Elizabeth's sister, or could it bring him some closure? Later that morning, Lily awoke fully, complaining of dizziness. After helping her settle on the living room couch, Claire tried a gentle distraction. "Why don't we color?" "I have some crayons and a new coloring book." The girl shook her head, pressing her lips into a thin line. "I just want to watch cartoons. My head hurts." Claire draped a soft blanket over Lily. "We can do that. Let me know if you need anything." A few minutes into the cartoon, Lily quietly said, "I had a dream about Mom last night." Claire paused. "What was the dream about?" "She was singing to me, an old lullaby. Dad never sings it. Sometimes he just pretends it doesn't exist, but I remember Mom's voice." "Maybe he doesn't sing it because it reminds him so much of her," Claire suggested gently. Lily gave a small nod, though her eyes were still far away. The conversation ended, but it lingered in Claire's thoughts. She decided to investigate Elizabeth's presence in the house, a portrait in the study, old photographs, anything that could bring her closer to the truth. By afternoon, while Lily napped again, Claire ventured into the study. Shelves lined with leather-bound books formed a majestic backdrop behind Marcus's imposing mahogany desk. Family portraits hung on the walls, black and white photographs of the Sterling lineage, formal wedding portraits, and finally, a smaller frame that drew Claire's attention. In it, a radiant Elizabeth cradled a newborn Lily. Claire's hand trembled. The resemblance to the baby picture she had in her suitcase, the shape of the nose, the delicate features, was uncanny. She wondered if Elizabeth had known about her. Perhaps she'd never had the chance to search for a lost sibling. A wave of sorrow washed over Claire, along with the fear that her presence here might be seen as an intrusion. Startled, she heard footsteps. Quickly, She turned to find Mrs. Henley at the study's entrance. The older woman held a feather duster, her gaze wary. "I see you've discovered some of the family photos," she remarked. Claire swallowed. "I was just admiring them." Mrs. Henley's expression softened. Elizabeth was well loved. This house hasn't felt the same since she passed. Marcus struggles to speak about her, and Lily is caught in the middle. Claire nodded, heart pounding. "I only hope I can help Lily feel less alone." Mrs. Henley gave a thoughtful look. "There's more than one way to be alone, Claire. I sense you might know a thing or two about that too. Just be careful not to shoulder burdens that aren't yours." Claire didn't respond immediately. She sensed the woman's concern, almost as if Mrs. Henley suspected Claire had a personal stake in this. The caution in her eyes spoke volumes, though these were delicate matters, and prying too far could break the fragile peace that existed in the mansion. As Mrs. Henley turned to dust the bookcases, Claire cast one last glance at the photograph of Elizabeth and baby Lily. A knot formed in her stomach. She had to tread carefully. Lily's health and the entire household's emotional balance were at stake. The truth she carried felt heavier each day, and she wondered how long she could keep it hidden before the tension inside her finally erupted. At dusk, the Sterling mansion glowed with a warm, golden light that filtered through stained glass windows, casting dancing colors on the foyer's marble floors. Claire stood near the stairs, reflecting on the past week's whirlwind of responsibility and emotional undercurrents. Each morning, she woke early to tend to Lily, and each evening ended with a swirl of questions about her own identity. Marcus had spent most of this particular day in meetings downtown. Upon returning, he went straight to Lily's room without so much as a word to Claire or Mrs. Henley, his usual pattern when he felt overwhelmed. But tonight, Lily's muffled sobs and Marcus's hushed consolations alerted Claire that something was off. She approached Lily's door, hesitating to intrude. A pang of worry tugged at her. Finally, she knocked softly and entered. Marcus sat on the edge of Lily's bed, his expression pained. Lily's cheeks were stained with tears, her breath trembling. "What's wrong?" Claire asked gently. Lily sniffled. "The medicine is making me feel awful. My stomach hurts, and my head is spinning." Marcus rubbed her back. "I'm calling Dr. Winston first thing in the morning if this side effect continues." Claire moved closer, placing a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder. "Would you like a sip of water?" "A little ginger tea might help with nausea." The girl nodded, her eyes still shining with tears. Claire looked to Marcus. "I'll get some ginger tea. That usually helps settle things." Marcus exhaled slowly, relief evident in his features. "Thank you." While Claire prepared the tea, she couldn't help but reflect on how truly vulnerable both father and daughter were. She remembered her own childhood, bouncing from one foster home to another before her adoption. Though she'd eventually found a loving environment, she never forgot the nights she cried herself to sleep, wishing for a semblance of stability. Lily's distress felt achingly familiar. Returning with the tea, she found Lily calmer, but her breathing was still a bit ragged. Marcus watched as Lily sipped the warm drink, slowly regaining composure. When Lily finally relaxed, exhaustion took over, and she fell into a light sleep. Marcus rose, indicating for Claire to follow him into the hallway. Once outside Lily's room, he closed the door partway. "Thank you," he said, his voice subdued. "She trusts you. That matters more than you know." Claire glanced at Lily's door. "I care about her. Whatever happens, I want what's best for Lily." He studied her for a moment, his normally guarded eyes revealing raw emotion. "I can't stand seeing her in pain. Sometimes I'm not sure what to do." She swallowed back her instinct to comfort him with more than professional words. "We'll keep trying. Dr. Winston will adjust her treatment if necessary. We're not giving up." Marcus's mouth lifted in a faint, sad smile. "You said we, like we're in this together." Claire nodded, realizing she had fallen into that pronoun naturally. "We are, aren't we? All of us want the same thing, to see Lily healthy and happy." "Yes," he murmured, looking away briefly. "Well, it's late. I'm sure you're tired." Before she could reply, he turned and walked down the hallway, shoulders rigid with the unspoken weight he carried. Claire remained for a moment, the silence thick around her. Perhaps, in a different circumstance, she might reassure him that everything would be all right, but she knew life was seldom so simple. Later that night, Claire retired to her suite. Unable to sleep, she retrieved a small envelope from her suitcase. Carefully, she pulled out the old photograph. An infant in a hospital blanket, date-stamped decades ago. On the back, her adoptive mother's handwriting read, "Claire at birth, name unknown." The sense of longing she felt was almost overwhelming. If Elizabeth truly was her sister, this photo represented a puzzle piece in a family secret that spanned decades. The next morning arrived with an unexpected sense of possibility. Lily's pain had lessened, and her spirits were slightly improved. Over breakfast, the girl managed a shy smile when Claire brought her a plate of scrambled eggs decorated with ketchup in the shape of a smiley face. "Why the face?" Lily asked, giggling. "Because sometimes we need a funny reminder to start the day with hope," Claire answered, relieved to see Lily's smile. "Mrs. Henley joined them, offering Lily a bowl of fruit. "You look a bit better today, my dear." "I feel a bit better," Lily admitted. Then she glanced at Claire. "Are you staying? For a long time?" The question made Claire pause. "Yes," she finally said. "I'll be here as long as you need me." Mrs. Henley watched the exchange with a thoughtful expression. After clearing the dishes, she pulled Claire aside. "Marcus asked me to tell you he'd like to see you in his study at noon. There's something important he wants to discuss." Claire's pulse quickened. "Did he mention what it's about?" "Only that he wants to clarify a few details about your role here." Mrs. Henley placed a hand on Claire's arm. "Don't worry, my dear. You're doing fine." Though the words were meant to soothe, Claire couldn't tamp down the nervous flutter in her chest. Perhaps Marcus was already sensing her hidden curiosity, or maybe he just wanted to finalize her employment terms. Whatever the reason, Claire knew that stepping into that study could be a turning point. She took a deep breath, realizing she was indeed at the brink of something new, something bigger than just a job. Claire stood at the threshold of Marcus's study, heart pounding against her ribcage. The hushed grandeur of the room, rich mahogany shelves and a window overlooking the immaculately groomed gardens, felt almost oppressive this afternoon. She drew a deep breath and knocked softly. "Come in," came Marcus's voice, low and controlled. She found him seated behind his large desk, drumming his fingers on a leather-bound book. A faint crease marred his brow, and the light from the window cast long shadows across his face. Claire stepped forward, feeling as if she were approaching a high judge rather than her employer. "Thank you for coming," Marcus began. He motioned to an armchair across from him. "Have a seat," Claire complied, folding her hands in her lap. "Is there something specific you'd like to discuss about my role here?" Marcus exhaled, as though searching for the right words. "You've been here a short time, but Lily already trusts you." I've never seen her open up so quickly, especially after he trailed off, the memory of Elizabeth's death weighing on him. "Anyway, I've been thinking, Lily's condition demands constant monitoring, but I also want her to feel like a normal child as much as possible. I'm prepared to increase your responsibilities, activities, maybe some light homeschooling if her health requires her to stay away from school for long periods. Would you be comfortable taking that on?" A A flicker of relief eased Claire's nerves. She had feared this meeting might be about her background or something she'd inadvertently revealed. "Yes, of course," she replied. "I've done that sort of coordination before, but I'd need to speak with Dr. Winston about any limitations." Marcus nodded. "I'll arrange it." He paused, scrutinizing her. "Thank you for your dedication." Before she could respond, Mrs. Henley appeared at the open door. She wore an apron dusted with flour, her silver hair pinned back neatly. "Pardon me, Mr. Sterling, but might I steal Claire for just a moment? The pharmacist rang, and I'd like her input on Lily's medication schedule." Marcus waved a hand of permission, and Claire rose. As she followed Mrs. Henley down the corridor, the older woman offered a kind smile. "I hope he wasn't too stiff with you. He has a lot on his mind." Claire let out a soft laugh. "He's certainly intense, but I'm relieved. He actually wants me more involved in Lily's life. It's good for her, I think." They reached the kitchen, where Mrs. Henley gestured for Claire to sit at the small breakfast nook. Instead of discussing medications immediately, the housekeeper took a seat across from her, resting her elbows on the table. "Claire," she began, her voice gentle, "I can tell you care about Lily. You've brought a sense of warmth back to this house, and for that, I'm grateful." Claire felt her cheeks heat under the praise. "Thank you. I just want to do what's right for her." Mrs. Henley nodded, eyes keen. "I also see the curiosity in you. You look at the family portraits, at Elizabeth's belongings. There's a longing there." Claire's pulse quickened, words momentarily stuck in her throat. Was she that transparent? She fumbled for a response. I'm just interested in the family's history. Lily talks about her mother so often. It's natural to want to understand." Softening her tone, Mrs. Henley gently patted Claire's hand. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but be cautious. Marcus is a proud man, and his grief runs deeper than most realize. Tread carefully when it comes to Elizabeth." Claire managed a small nod. The sincerity in Mrs. Henley's gaze was comforting, like a mentor offering guidance rather than scolding. "I understand." Just then, Gregory Mathis strolled in, crisp in his suit as always. "Ah, there you two are," he said with a practiced cordiality. "The pharmacist is online too, if you'd like to confirm Lily's dosage changes. I can stay on the call if you prefer." Claire glanced at Mrs. Henley. "I'll handle it, if that's all right." Mrs. Henley agreed, and Claire headed to the wall-mounted phone near the pantry. She spoke with the pharmacist, clarifying Lily's medication schedule. After jotting down notes, she hung up and turned to see Gregory and Mrs. Henley engaged in quiet conversation. She caught only a snippet, something about the upcoming charity event and how it might affect Marcus's schedule. When Gregory noticed her, he pivoted seamlessly. "Everything's sorted with the prescription. Yes, we just need to adjust one of Lily's doses to earlier in the evening." Gregory smiled, an air of relief about him. "Perfect. I'll make sure Dr. Winston gets the update. I'm glad Marcus brought you on board, Claire." His tone carried genuine warmth. "I can already see a difference in Lily and in the house." Mrs. Henley gave a slight nod of agreement, her earlier worries seemingly placated. Claire felt a wave of gratitude for their acceptance. Though her secret motives still weighed heavily on her, moments like this reinforced that she was doing something genuinely good for Lily and for the entire household. When the conversation ended, Mrs. Henley left to return to her baking, while Gregory retreated to his office to finalize a financial report for Marcus. Claire glanced around the spacious kitchen, taking in the comforting glow of the afternoon sun filtering through wide windows. Though her path was riddled with uncertainties, her hidden connection to Elizabeth, her growing bond with Lily, and the guarded nature of Marcus, she couldn't deny a sense of belonging, fragile though it was. Silently, she vowed to heed Mrs. Henley's gentle advice. She would care for Lily learn what she could about Elizabeth, but do so without shattering the trust that was beginning to form. All journeys needed a guide, and in her own quiet way, Mrs. Henley had just proven she was willing to be that mentor, a seasoned heart ready to offer wisdom. Marcus rarely left Lily's side for more than a few hours at a time, but the upcoming charity gala for Sterling Enterprises demanded his presence. The event, scheduled for the following week, was a major fundraiser aimed at supporting pediatric healthcare initiatives, a cause suddenly close to his heart. "I hate leaving her," he confided to Claire one morning, as she prepared Lily's midday medication in the living room. Lily was curled up on the sofa, flipping through a picture book, her complexion brighter than usual. "But the board insists my attendance is necessary, especially since some of our largest donors are involved." Claire stopped measuring out the medication for a moment. "I understand. It's important to secure support for research and medical advancements, and Lily is in good hands." He offered a faint smile. "Thank you. Actually, I was going to ask if you'd accompany me to the gala, I mean." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You want me there?" "Strictly professional, of course," Marcus added hastily, color rising to his cheeks. "I might have to leave the event early if Lily needs me. If you're there, you can help keep me informed and handle any questions about her routine from the medical donors. Plus, I think your input could be valuable." Claire glanced at Lily, who was now gazing over, curious. Inwardly, Claire recognized this invitation as more than just a business courtesy. Marcus was extending his trust beyond the walls of the house, effectively letting her step into the broader Sterling orbit. "All right," she agreed. "If Lily's well enough by then, I'd be honored." Marcus nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "We'll finalize details soon." Later that day, Mrs. Henley offered to guide Claire through the household's formal etiquette. "These galas can be overwhelming if you're not used to them," she explained, leading Claire to a seldom-used lounge filled with vintage furniture and a grand piano. "Marcus's life is a world of polished appearances, but under all that formality, you'll see the same man who stands over Lily's bed each night, worrying if she'll be okay." Claire listened attentively. To blend into this environment, she needed more than a dress. She needed to understand the unspoken rules. She had never been to an event of such magnitude and felt a flicker of anxiety at the thought of mingling with wealthy donors, each wearing carefully crafted smiles. Meanwhile, Lily's health showed small but steady improvements. Dr. Winston, a kindly middle-aged pediatrician, visited one afternoon with encouraging news. The new medication regimen was helping. Lily's immune markers, while still precarious, were better than they had been in months. "That's excellent," Marcus said, visibly relieved. "Thank you, Doctor." Lily beamed, the spark in her eyes returning. Claire couldn't resist a wide smile. "Keep resting," she gently reminded the girl, "and we'll see even more progress." Dr. Winston gathered his papers. "Lily's stable enough that occasional outings might do her good, as long as we avoid large crowds and potential infections." Lily perked up. "Can we go to the park again, Daddy?" "We only went once this month." Marcus hesitated. "We'll see how things go. Maybe a short trip, but we need to be cautious." That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Claire lingered in the hallway. She watched as Marcus checked on Lily one final time. He emerged from her room, shoulders visibly less tense than before. Spotting Claire, he halted. "You're still up," he observed softly. She shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the gala and everything that might happen. Just want to make sure Lily's okay with me leaving her, even if it's just for a few hours." He smiled, a rare expression that smoothed the lines of worry on his face. "You'll handle it just fine. I appreciate that you're so concerned." A pause stretched between them, weighted by unspoken emotions. Claire, still grappling with her secret, felt compelled to ask something that had been nagging at her. Marcus, if it's not too personal, how did you and Elizabeth meet? His face clouded momentarily, but he didn't shut down. We met in college, at a fundraiser ironically. She was studying art history, and I was immersed in economics. She said my bow tie looked ridiculous. His lips curved into a nostalgic smile. I think I fell in love with her in that instant. Claire's heart twisted with longing. She yearned to know more about Elizabeth, about their life. Yet she sensed she was treading on delicate ground. She sounds wonderful. She was, Marcus said, glancing toward Lily's door. I'm sure Lily got her kindness from Elizabeth. The silence returned, and Claire felt a swell of emotion. If Elizabeth truly was her sister, the woman's kindness might also be part of her own legacy. Guilt pooled in her stomach at the thought of keeping that to herself. After a moment, Marcus cleared his throat, the vulnerability in his eyes replaced by a more guarded expression. I should get some rest. You too. We need to be prepared for Lily's next treatment cycle. Yes, of course, Claire replied, though her mind still swirled with questions. Alone in the hallway, she realized she had crossed an invisible threshold with Marcus. He had let her see a sliver of his past with Elizabeth. Yet the deeper she ventured, the more she risked revealing her own hidden truths. For the first time since her arrival, Claire passed through the imposing iron gates of the Sterling mansion without Lily in tow. Gregory drove her into central Boston so she could run errands and prepare for the upcoming gala. As she gazed out the car window, she marveled at the change in scenery, towering office buildings, bustling sidewalks, and the modern hum of city life stood in stark contrast to the hushed elegance of the Sterling estate. You'll find most of what you need at this boutique, Gregory explained, pulling up to a refined shop. Mrs. Henley insisted it's the best place for formal attire. Claire stepped out, feeling slightly overwhelmed. Her experience shopping for clothes typically involved department store sales or modest boutiques. Here, elegant displays sparkled under warm spotlights, mannequins draped in sleek gowns. A friendly store clerk approached, and within minutes, Claire found herself in a dressing room, trying on a dark blue evening gown with a simple cut that flattered her figure. She studied her reflection. The dress highlighted her slender shoulders, and for a moment she barely recognized herself. Was this truly the same woman who'd grown up moving from one foster home to another, always longing for a sense of permanence? When she returned to the car, Gregory gave an approving nod. I'm sure it looks perfect. We'll put it on the family account. That's kind of you, Claire said, a blush warming her cheeks. But I'm not used to such generosity. Gregory shrugged. It's standard procedure for employees attending events on behalf of Sterling Enterprises. Employees. Claire felt a pang, reminded of the professional distance. Yet she also knew how important this event was for Lily's future. Perhaps additional funding could lead to better treatments or medical breakthroughs. In any case, she resolved to wear the gown with grace, representing Lily's interests above all. On the ride back, her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henley appeared. Lily is fine. Dr. Winston stopped by. We're adjusting meds again. Mild side effects, nothing alarming. Don't worry. Claire's muscles eased a fraction as relief washed over her. Lily had become such a constant on her mind that a simple text meant everything. Later, she and Gregory pulled up to the estate. Beyond the ornate gates, Claire spotted something unusual: reporters. A small group of them stood near the entrance, cameras poised. Gregory frowned. A story must have leaked about the gala or Lily's condition. The media can be ruthless. Claire's stomach knotted. One camera flashed, capturing their car as it entered. She instinctively ducked, not wanting her face plastered across the tabloids, especially with the precarious family secret she carried. Once inside, she found Marcus in the foyer, tension radiating from him. He was speaking in low tones with Ava Morgan, a poised woman in her early 40s, clad in a tailored business suit. Claire had heard the name before. Ava was Marcus's business partner and a major shareholder in Sterling Enterprises. Ava's sharp gaze flicked to Claire. "Ah, the new nanny," she said, tone civil but distant. "Marcus, we need to finalize the press statement. They're already speculating about Lily's health, which could affect our stock prices if rumors get out of control." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it. But Lily's health isn't a PR opportunity, Ava." "I understand," Ava replied coolly. "But we have to be strategic." She glanced at Claire, offering a businesslike smile. "Welcome to the Sterling family, in a manner of speaking. I trust you'll keep Lily's best interests at heart." Though Ava's words were polite, Claire sensed an underlying suspicion. Determined not to cower, she managed a calm nod. "Of course." Moments later, Ava departed, her stilettos clicking on the marble floor. Claire turned to Marcus. "What was that about?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "She's concerned about investors panicking if Lily's condition becomes public knowledge. I want to keep Lily's privacy intact. Let them think what they want about me. But Lily is off limits." Claire admired his protectiveness. "If there's anything I can do to help..." He paused, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "Just keep focusing on Lily. Let me worry about the rest." As they spoke, the echo of a camera flash outside the gate seemed to linger in the air. The world beyond the Sterling mansion was a place of scrutiny and intrigue, ready to pounce on any vulnerability. Claire couldn't help wondering how her own hidden agenda would fare if the media or Ava Morgan ever caught wind of her true background. Later that evening, she carried her new gown to her suite, carefully hanging it in the wardrobe. As she looked around the opulent room, she realized that her life had merged with the Sterlings more than she'd ever expected. The ornate bedspread, the thick carpet underfoot, the private bathroom stocked with luxurious soaps, everything signaled a world she had never known. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart pound. Her loyalty to Lily and her quest for answers about Elizabeth coexisted in uneasy alliance. Day by day, she ventured further into this world beyond the gates, each step making it harder to turn back. And with each new interaction, like Ava's cool stare, she sensed the dangers that come with secrets and power. Morning rays filtered through the sheer curtains in Lily's bedroom, illuminating the lavender walls with a soft glow. Claire stood by Lily's bed, gently stirring the child from her slumber. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Claire whispered, brushing back a strand of Lily's fine blonde hair. Lily yawned, blinking in the sunlight. "Do I have any tests today?" "Not today," Claire replied, smiling. "Dr. Winston wants you to rest and build up your strength." She handed Lily a cup of water. "I was thinking we could do some painting later, if you're up for it." Lily's eyes brightened. "Really? I love painting flowers." Claire nodded enthusiastically. "We can set up in the sunroom. The light there is perfect." As Lily sipped her water, Claire carefully checked her temperature. Normal. Relief coursed through her. Lily's health was no longer in the precarious state it once was. Encouraged by the progress, Claire followed Dr. Winston's latest guidelines, helping Lily dress in comfortable clothes before guiding her downstairs for breakfast. Marcus was already seated at the dining table, reading emails on his tablet. He looked up and offered a warm smile at the sight of Lily walking on her own. "Morning, Princess." "Sleep well." Lily climbed into a chair across from him, while Claire took a seat beside her. "I did. Claire says we can paint today." "That sounds wonderful," Marcus said, pushing aside his tablet. He seemed more relaxed than usual, as if Lily's improved health had lifted a substantial weight from his shoulders. Over scrambled eggs and toast, Lily chatted excitedly about what flowers she might paint. Mrs. Henley hovered in the background, discreetly refilling juice glasses. There was a comforting normalcy to it all, something that felt like the calm before the storm. Midway through breakfast, Gregory entered, a careful expression on his face. "Marcus, I need your signature on a few documents, contracts for the upcoming fundraiser. Also, the venue coordinator called. They require a final headcount by tomorrow." Marcus nodded, turning to Claire. "We'll finalize your seat at the gala as well. I appreciate you agreeing to attend." Claire felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "I'm happy to help, really." After breakfast, she led Lily to the sunroom, a lovely extension of the main house. Its large windows overlooked a small rose garden. She set up a canvas, brushes and jars of water, then placed Lily in a soft armchair with a small blanket. As Lily began painting bright pink roses, Claire guided her through techniques. "Try a smaller brush for the petals," she suggested, yet left enough room for the child to express herself freely. Eventually, Lily paused, her expression distant. "I remember painting with Mom once, but I was really little, so it's kind of fuzzy." Claire gently squeezed Lily's shoulder. "Do you remember what you painted?" She helped me paint a butterfly. She said one day I'd fly just like it if I believed I could." A soft ache formed in Claire's chest. Even in the faintest memory, Elizabeth's warmth was palpable. She tried not to dwell on her own questions about this mysterious sister. Instead, she kept Lily focused on the present, coaxing her into painting sunflowers next. After an hour or so, Lily grew tired. Claire helped her wash the brushes and put away the paints before guiding her to a nearby sofa for a rest. The child fell asleep quickly, still clutching her brush. Claire pulled a throw blanket over her and took a moment to admire the painting, a bouquet of roses and a hint of sunlight in the corner. It seemed to symbolize the family's cautious hope. A knock on the doorframe made Claire turn. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets. He surveyed Lily, then the painting, and whispered, "She looks happy." Claire nodded. "She is. It's good to see her like this." He stepped into the sunroom, lowering his voice to avoid disturbing Lily. "Thank you for your patience with her." "It's my job," Claire replied, though the words lacked the formality she intended. It felt more like a calling than just a job. Marcus's gaze roamed the room, Lily's painting supplies, the scattered sketches, the half-finished canvas. "You've settled in well." "This house hasn't felt so alive in a long time." Warmth flooded Claire's cheeks. "I'm glad to help." A comfortable hush lingered between them before Marcus cleared his throat. "I need to head back to the office. There's a board meeting in a couple of hours. Please text me if Lily shows any sign of distress." "Of course." He gave a final glance at his sleeping daughter, then departed. Claire could sense the shift in his demeanor, less guarded, more open to the small joys around him. Perhaps Lily's improvement allowed him to breathe again, to let a glimmer of hope into his life. Left in the sunroom's peaceful hush, Claire sat by Lily's side, reflecting on how seamlessly she'd integrated into this routine. The day's simplicity, painting, laughter, restful sleep, felt like a precious gift. She found herself quietly wishing that the upcoming gala wouldn't break the delicate rhythm they'd established. Still, she knew the outside world loomed, with reporters prowling at the gates and curiosity swirling around Lily's condition. And amid it all, Claire held her own secret, uncertain of what revelations or havoc it might bring. For now, however, she allowed herself the tenderness of the moment, content to watch over the child, who reminded her that hope, like a painting, could be built one careful stroke at a time. A few evenings before the gala, Claire found a rare moment of solitude in the family's expansive library. She wandered among shelves, filled with leather-bound classics and contemporary novels, searching for a children's book that Lily might enjoy. The soft glow of a brass lamp cast flickering shadows, giving the space an almost sacred air. She paused in front of a shelf labeled Family Mementos. There, a series of albums and scrapbooks lined the lower shelves. Curiosity tugged at her. Perhaps more photographs of Elizabeth, but she remembered Mrs. Henley's caution about treading carefully. With a sigh, she ran her fingers across the spines of the books without pulling any from the shelf. Suddenly, a soft cough made her spin around. Gregory stood at the library's entrance, hands clasped behind his back. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "Just looking for a storybook for Lily." Gregory moved closer, scanning the shelves. "I can recommend one. She used to love The Secret Garden. Elizabeth read it to her when she was very young. We might have a copy around here somewhere." Claire gave a grateful smile. "That sounds perfect." As Gregory rummaged through the titles, his usually reserved demeanor softened. "I've been with Marcus a long time, you know, since before Lily was born." He pulled out a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden, handing it to Claire. "It's been hard watching them go through so much. Elizabeth's death, Lily's health struggles. It changed the dynamic of this house." Claire hugged the book to her chest. "I can imagine." "It can't be easy for you either," Gregory shrugged, though his expression was somber. "I'm just grateful Lily's improving, and you've been a big part of that. Marcus may not say it openly, but I see how he looks at you, like you're a lifeline." Her cheeks warmed. "I'm just doing my job." He studied her, an intent look behind his eyes. "People rarely come into this mansion without wanting something, a deal, a partnership, money. But you seem different. That's why Ava is cautious. She thinks you might have a hidden agenda." A surge of alarm shot through Claire. Did Gregory suspect something? She tried to keep her voice steady. "I can't blame her for being wary. The Sterlings are influential, and Lily's situation is delicate." Gregory nodded thoughtfully. "True, but for what it's worth, I believe you're here for the right reasons." He hesitated, then placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a gesture of support. "If you ever need an ally, you can count on me." Relief mingled with guilt in Claire's chest. She offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Gregory. That means more than you know." Before the conversation could go deeper, Mrs. Henley's voice floated from the corridor. "Claire, Lily's calling for you." Claire excused herself and hurried to the living room, where Lily was propped up on the sofa with blankets. "Is everything okay?" Claire asked, her pulse quickening. Lily nodded, a tear trailing down her cheek. "I was dreaming about the hospital. I got scared. Daddy's in a meeting and Mrs. Henley said you'd read to me." Claire knelt beside her. "Absolutely." She showed Lily the book. "We'll start The Secret Garden. It's all about growing and healing. I think you'll love it." Lily wiped her tears and nodded, snuggling closer as Claire began to read. The gentle rhythm of the story soon lulled Lily into a calmer state, her eyelids drooping. Meanwhile, Marcus appeared at the threshold, briefcase in hand, presumably back from his meeting. His eyes took in the scene, Lily clinging to Claire's arm, comforted by her presence. Claire met his gaze over the book's pages, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that they were a team, joined by concern for Lily's well-being. She finished the chapter and closed the book softly, not wanting to wake Lily if she had slipped into sleep. Marcus walked over, quietly setting his briefcase down. "Long day," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. "Board meetings, phone calls, all that seems insignificant when I see her like this." Claire couldn't help the compassion in her voice. "She's doing better, day by day." Marcus nodded, then lowered his voice. "I want you to be honest with me. Am I expecting too much from you? I've made you caretaker, nurse, teacher. It's more than I intended, yet you've never complained." She gazed down at Lily's sleeping form. "I want to do it." She's special to me." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Gratitude and perhaps a hint of warmth that went beyond mere employer-employee respect. "Thank you," he whispered. Outside, the evening sky had darkened to a deep blue, the last streaks of sunset vanishing. The weight of the day seemed to rest on their shoulders, and yet in that simple moment an alliance formed. Marcus, Lily, Claire, and even Gregory and Mrs. Henley united for a common cause of healing and hope. Claire lightly brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead, silently vowing to protect this child as though she were her own. In many ways, Lily was her own flesh and blood, if her suspicions were correct. For now, she let that truth remain unspoken, content in the knowledge that her bond with Lily was strengthening every day. The day of the gala approached, and the Sterling mansion hummed with preparations. Fresh flowers were delivered, formal invitations confirmed, and tailored suits pressed. Yet amid the flurry, tension crackled in the air. Claire sensed it every time Ava Morgan appeared, her polished heels echoing across the marble floors. Late one afternoon, Ava and Marcus retreated into his study to discuss final details for the fundraiser. Their voices carried through the partly closed door, muffled but strained. Claire, on her way to check on Lily, caught snippets of their conversation. "Can't let personal matters overshadow business," Ava's voice insisted. "I'm aware," Marcus replied, frustration tinging his tone. "But Lily's health comes first." Claire quietly slipped past the study, not wanting to eavesdrop. When she reached Lily's room, she found the girl arranging stuffed animals in a row. Lily beamed at Claire's entrance. "Look, I'm making a zoo." Claire smiled, kneeling down. "These are some well-behaved animals. They all love each other," Lily said matter-of-factly. "So no one fights." A pang hit Claire, recalling the tension she'd just heard. If only real life could mirror Lily's innocent view. Determined not to dampen the child's spirits, Claire joined in, placing a small giraffe next to a plush dog. A few minutes later, Ava's voice echoed down the hallway, sharper this time. Claire gently tapped Lily's shoulder. "I'll be right back, okay? I need to grab something." Stepping out, she saw Ava storm out of Marcus's study, face taut with irritation. The woman paused upon seeing Claire, her expression shifting to a cool neutrality. "Claire, isn't it?" she asked, as if they hadn't already met. "Yes, Ms. Morgan." Ava smoothed a hand over her tailored blazer. "I believe you're accompanying Marcus to the gala." Claire nodded. "Yes, I'll be there to support him with any matters related to Lily's condition." "Of course," Ava replied curtly, a flicker of disapproval in her eyes. She paused, scanning Claire with the sharpness of someone accustomed to reading people's weaknesses. "You've certainly become indispensable quite fast." Claire felt the jab and maintained a polite smile. "My focus is on Lily's well-being." Ava nodded in a way that seemed more dismissive than agreement. "See that it remains so. Marcus has enough on his plate without added complications." The warning was clear. Ava brushed past, her perfume lingering in the corridor. Claire released a shaky breath, unsettled by the coldness of the exchange. It was evident Ava harbored suspicions, maybe not the truth about Claire's possible link to Elizabeth, but enough to see her as a threat or a potential distraction. Later that evening, Claire found refuge in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Henley prepare a light soup for Lily's dinner. The comforting aroma of simmering chicken broth filled the air, while Mrs. Henley chopped vegetables. Claire stirred the pot thoughtfully. "You look troubled, dear," Mrs. Henley observed, glancing at Claire. "Everything all right?" Claire offered a tight smile. "I just had a run-in with Ava Morgan. She doesn't seem too fond of my presence." Mrs. Henley sighed. "Ava is protective of Marcus's business interests. She's known him a long time, though not as long as I have. Still, she sees new faces as potential risks." Claire nodded, searching for the right words. I just wish she'd realize I don't have any hidden agenda. My only goal is to help Lily." Mrs. Henley's knife paused on the cutting board. She studied Claire carefully. "Is that entirely true?" she asked, her tone gentle rather than accusatory. The question struck deep. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but found herself hesitating. Yes, helping Lily was her priority. But she couldn't deny the underlying drive to uncover the truth about Elizabeth, about her own birth story. "I do care about Lily more than anything," Claire said at last. "But there are things I'm trying to understand. About this family. About Elizabeth." Mrs. Henley nodded slowly, eyes reflecting a mix of compassion and concern. "I sense there's more to your story, child. I won't pry. But be cautious. Whatever answers you seek, be sure they won't harm Lily or Marcus in the process." Claire felt tears threaten to surface. The quiet kindness in the older woman's words reminded her of the gravity of the situation. She took a steadying breath. "I promise I'll never do anything to hurt them." Mrs. Henley resumed chopping, her voice calm. "That's good to hear. Now let's get this soup ready. Lily needs her strength." When the meal was done, Claire carried a steaming bowl to Lily, who sat up in bed excitedly. Smells good," the child declared. Claire laughed softly. "Eat slow, okay? It's still hot." As Lily blew on a spoonful, Marcus passed by the doorway, pausing with a tired smile. "Thank you, Claire, for everything." A sudden swirl of emotions filled her. Gratitude for his trust, guilt for her hidden motives, protectiveness for Lily, and an inexplicable warmth every time Marcus acknowledged her efforts. "Of course," she replied softly. In the hallway's quiet, she watched him go, sensing the weight on his shoulders. Shareholders, Ava's machinations, Lily's fragile health, his own lingering grief over Elizabeth. Claire couldn't help but wonder if the truth about her connection to Elizabeth would soothe his soul or shatter whatever fragile peace he had built. For now, the shadows of suspicion lingered in every corridor, cast by Ava's cold gaze and by Claire's own unspoken secret. The gala loomed as a turning point where public eyes and private tensions would converge. She only hoped that whatever happened next, Lily's newfound spark of hope wouldn't be extinguished. A crisp autumn breeze swept across Boston on the evening of the Sterling Enterprises Charity Gala. Outside the luxurious event hall, photographers snapped photos of arriving guests, their cameras flashing like tiny bursts of lightning against the darkening sky. Claire stood in the back seat of the Sterling limousine, heart pounding as Marcus sat beside her, straightening his cufflinks with a composed air. "This is more than just a fundraiser," he murmured, casting a wary glance out the window at the throng of journalists. "For some of these donors, it's a test, proof that Sterling Enterprises can weather personal storms and still stand strong." Claire gave a small nod. "I understand. I'll do my best to help." She wore the elegant dark blue gown she'd purchased days ago, feeling both out of place and determined. Her main concern was Lily, who had remained at home under Mrs. Henley's watchful eye. The child's health had stabilized, but the unpredictability of her rare illness lingered like a silent threat. As the driver opened the door, Marcus stepped out first, cameras whirred, capturing every angle. Claire emerged a moment later, keenly aware of the curious stares. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who is she? Another socialite? A new girlfriend? She forced herself to keep her chin high, reminding herself, I'm here for Lily. Inside the grand foyer, gilded chandeliers illuminated elegant tables draped in white linens. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Marcus offered Claire his arm, guiding her through the crowd toward a table reserved for key staff and family. The air buzzed with anticipation, but beneath the polished veneer, Claire sensed tension. Ava Morgan appeared, dressed in a silver gown that complemented her sharp features. Her expression, however, was far from welcoming. "Marcus," she greeted, barely disguising her displeasure. "I see you've arrived. The keynote speakers will begin soon. Try to greet the medical donors first, Dr. Green and Dr. Patel. They're quite pivotal to our fundraising goals." Marcus nodded, though his eyes flicked to Claire. "Stay close," he instructed softly. "I'd like you to meet them too. They're involved in pediatric research that could help Lily." Claire's heart lifted at the prospect. If new research meant a breakthrough for Lily's disease, any discomfort tonight would be worth it. They made their way to a small cluster of suited men and women near the stage. Dr. Green, a balding man in his 50s, perked up when introduced to Claire. "Marcus speaks highly of you," he said, shaking her hand warmly. "He says you've been instrumental in improving Lily's home care." Claire felt a hint of pride. "I'm glad I can make a difference. Lily's such a brave child." Their conversation was cut short by a swarm of people wanting Marcus's attention. Claire took a step back, observing the controlled chaos. Ava swooped in, whisking Marcus toward a table of high-profile donors. Across the room, a few journalists with press badges snapped photos, some eyeing Claire as if curious about her identity. Suddenly, Gregory appeared at her side, his usually composed features showing a trace of anxiety. "Claire, can we talk?" She nodded, following him to a quieter corner near the coat check. "Is everything all right?" Gregory lowered his voice. "Mrs. Henley just called. Lily is fine, but she experienced a sudden dizziness and low-grade fever. It passed quickly, but they're keeping a close watch." Claire's stomach twisted. "Should I head home?" He shook his head. "Mrs. Henley says Lily is stable now, but you should inform Marcus so he's not caught off guard if he needs to leave abruptly." Relief mingled with concern. "I'll find him." Gregory squeezed her shoulder reassuringly and disappeared into the crowd. Claire returned to the ballroom, scanning for Marcus. She found him in a tense conversation with Ava, who wore an icy smile. Nearby, a pair of reporters hovered, eavesdropping. Catching Marcus's eye, Claire leaned in to deliver the update on Lily. His tense posture relaxed slightly, though worry clouded his features. "Thank you," he murmured. "If Lily's stable, we'll stay a bit longer, but I'll leave the moment I sense she needs me." Ava, overhearing, pressed her lips together in obvious disapproval. "Marcus, you can't rush out. We need you here to secure these donations. We've already lost a potential deal this quarter. Any sign of weakness might spook the rest." Marcus's jaw set. "My daughter isn't a weakness." The tension between them was palpable. Claire recognized that this was one of the many tests they would face tonight, balancing corporate demands, public perception, and Lily's fragile health. The evening wore on with speeches, polite applause, and pledges of generous contributions. Claire engaged in cautious small talk with potential donors, championing the idea that funds raised would directly aid families like Lily's. Through it all, she felt an undercurrent of stress nibbling at her composure. What if Lily's condition suddenly worsened? What if the press dug deeper into her own background? By the time the silent auction began, Claire's feet ached from standing. She spotted an empty seat at a side table and gratefully sank into it. Her mind flicked to Lily, imagining her tucked into bed at the mansion, hopefully sleeping soundly. She thought, too, of Elizabeth, the sister she never knew, whose memory hovered over this event like a guardian, or perhaps a ghost. The gala was far from over, but already Claire sensed they were all under a spotlight, one that illuminated not only their public personas, but also the deeper vulnerabilities they each carried. Close to midnight, the gala concluded amid a flurry of goodbyes and exchanged business cards. Claire felt relief wash over her as she and Marcus slipped away from the main crowd. With the evening's obligations satisfied and a sizable sum pledged for pediatric research, They could finally return to Lily. They rode in silence back to the mansion, the glow of passing streetlights illuminating Marcus's solemn expression. Claire's own thoughts raced, overshadowed by her worry for Lily. When they arrived, the grand foyer was dark and still. Mrs. Henley met them at the top of the stairs, lips pursed in concern. "She's resting peacefully now," the housekeeper whispered. "Fever's gone. Dr. Winston thinks it might just be a minor reaction to her latest medication schedule." Marcus exhaled in relief, his shoulders sagging. "Thank God. I'll look in on her." He disappeared into Lily's bedroom while Claire lingered in the hall with Mrs. Henley, who gave her a comforting smile. "Go on, dear. She'll be happy to see you too." Inside the dimly lit room, Lily lay curled under a floral quilt, her cheeks still a bit flushed. When Claire approached, the child's eyes fluttered open, a tired grin spread across her face. "Claire," she murmured. Claire leaned in, gently brushing Lily's hair aside. "Hey there. How are you feeling?" "Better," Lily murmured, her voice raspy with sleep. "I had a bad dream, but Mrs. Henley stayed with me." Claire glanced at Marcus, who stood watch from a corner of the room, hands in his pockets. "You scared us a bit," she told Lily softly, "but I'm so glad you're okay." Lily nodded, drifting off again. Marcus gestured for Claire to join him in the hallway, quietly closing the bedroom door behind them. In the dim corridor light, his expression was a tapestry of exhaustion, relief, and lingering tension. "How did the rest of the gala go, Mrs. Henley asked, stepping out from around the corner. Marcus's sigh was heavy. "We got the donations we needed, but it felt hollow without Lily there. Everything does, really." Claire felt her chest tighten. That same sense of hollowness had shadowed her for years, albeit for a different reason, never knowing her true family. Now that she was here, living among them, she wondered if she was any closer to filling that void. After Mrs. Henley returned to her own quarters, Marcus turned to Claire. "Thank you for tonight. You were a steady presence in a sea of demands." She gave a slight shrug. "I'm happy to help. Really." Something in his eyes flickered. "Claire, there's something I need to ask you." Her pulse quickened. Was he about to question her background, her interest in Elizabeth? She braced herself. "Of course. Go ahead." He hesitated, gaze sliding to Lily's door. "I realize tonight how easily everything can unravel. Lily is my world, and I rely on you more than I ever expected." His voice lowered, touched by a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. "If there's anything you need, help, resources, more days off, I want to make sure you know you can ask." A wave of relief mingled with guilt. He wasn't suspecting her hidden truths. He was offering support, assuming her burdens were simply job-related. Claire forced a steady breath, acknowledging how complicated her emotions had become. She cared for Marcus, not just as an employer, but as someone who shared this deep concern for Lily, someone whose grief and love were intertwined with her own quest for answers. "Thank you," she managed, "but I'm okay, truly." He ran a hand through his hair, releasing a quiet laugh devoid of amusement. "I'm not sure either of us is really okay, but maybe that's all right. We'll keep moving forward." Their eyes locked, a moment passing where unspoken confessions lingered like ghosts. Claire wanted to say, "I'm Elizabeth's sister," but her voice stuck in her throat. The fear of shattering what trust they had built weighed heavily on her. Finally, Marcus nodded, forcing a half-smile. "I'll check on Lily again in a bit. You should get some rest." "It's been a long night," Claire agreed, retreating to her room. She changed out of her gown and into comfortable pajamas, her mind turning in circles. She thought of Lily's frail smile, Marcus's guarded yet grateful tone, and the diaries she'd once glimpsed in the study but never opened. If Elizabeth had written about her long-lost sister, that knowledge might already be within these walls, waiting to be discovered. Slipping under the covers, Claire stared at the ceiling, a knot in her stomach. She felt torn between a moral duty to reveal who she was and a fear that the truth would hurt the very people she'd come to cherish. In the quiet dark, the house seemed to hold its breath, as if bracing for the secrets that might soon surface. A grey morning light filled the Sterling mansion, accompanied by a steady drizzle tapping against the windows. Claire woke earlier than usual, haunted by fragments of a dream she couldn't fully recall. Something about Elizabeth reaching out to her, only to vanish in a swirl of mist. Determined to distract herself, she checked on Lily, finding the child still asleep. Her face bore no signs of last night's fever, and her breathing was steady. Claire quietly slipped away, heading downstairs in search of a calming cup of tea. At the base of the stairs, she almost collided with Ava Morgan, who was leaving the study, a stack of documents in hand. Ava's eyes flicked over Claire, her lips pressed thin. "I was just reviewing some paperwork with Marcus," she said, as though the context needed explanation. Claire offered a polite nod, stepping aside. "I see." Ava paused, shifting her weight. "I understand you played a pivotal role at the gala, ensuring Marcus stayed focused." Impressive. The words sounded complimentary, but Claire detected an undertone, maybe annoyance that Marcus relied on Claire's presence. "Just doing my job," Claire replied evenly. Ava's gaze dropped to the folder she held. "Marcus values loyalty above all else. I hope, for your sake, you're as loyal as he believes you to be." Before Claire could respond, Ava strode off. A chill lingered in her wake, as if she'd left behind an unspoken threat. Claire's heartbeat quickened. She understood that Ava was no fool. If she hadn't uncovered Claire's secret yet, she still sensed that something was amiss. In the kitchen, Mrs. Henley handed Claire a steaming mug of chamomile tea. "You look as if you've seen a ghost, dear." Claire blew on the tea, grateful for its warmth. "Ava just cornered me in the hall. She implied that I'd better be loyal to Marcus." Mrs. Henley frowned. "Ava sees you as competition, perhaps. Not in the romantic sense, necessarily, but in terms of influence. Marcus is more receptive to you than he is to her, and that can be threatening in her position." Claire sipped her tea, anxiety churning in her gut. She wanted to talk to someone about the truth that gnawed at her, her suspicion that Elizabeth was her biological sister. But how could she burden Mrs. Henley with that? Instead, she kept silent, taking another calming sip. Moments later, Gregory arrived, summoning Claire to the study. Her stomach tensed, recalling Ava had just been there. She gave Mrs. Henley a grateful nod and left, tea in hand. In the study, she found Marcus seated behind his desk, tension evident in his rigid posture. A series of files lay open before him, financial statements, contracts, and photos from the gala. He lifted his gaze as Claire entered. "Close the door, please," she complied, feeling a prickle of nerves. "Is everything all right?" He ran a hand across his face, exhaling slowly. "We have a situation. Some reporters dug into Lily's medical records, or tried to. They're insinuating on gossip sites that her condition is far worse, that I've hidden details." Claire's grip on her mug tightened. "That's awful. How did they even—" Marcus shook his head. "No idea yet. Probably rumors and speculation. Ava wants me to do damage control. Issue a statement or show Lily in public to prove she's improving, but that's the last thing I want. Lily shouldn't be paraded around to assuage corporate fears." Claire's heart went out to him. "I agree. That would only stress her more." Marcus's gaze was dark, filled with a lingering helplessness. I'm not sure how to handle the press. My focus should be on Lily, not business politics. I can't let them exploit her. Claire's voice came out softer than she intended. You're doing your best. Maybe it's time to let others manage the corporate side while you focus on what really matters. He eyed her with a mix of admiration and frustration. Easier said than done. Sterling Enterprises isn't just a job, it's an empire, and it's under constant scrutiny. Silence fell between them, charged with unspoken fears. Claire could see the toll it all took on Marcus, the lines of worry etched into his face, the exhaustion in his posture. He was trapped between the demands of a public persona and the private terror of watching his child battle an unpredictable illness. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. I need a break from this office. Let's check on Lily together. They found Lily awake in her room, reading a picture book. She greeted them with a yawn and a smile. The sight of her, so vulnerable yet resilient, knotted Claire's chest. Lily's presence reminded them both what was truly at stake. You hungry? Marcus asked Lily, brushing back her hair gently. She nodded. Maybe some toast, Claire offered a cheerful smile. Coming right up, I'll go fix it. Marcus lingered behind, murmuring softly to Lily about the day's plans. As Claire exited, she couldn't shake the feeling of walls closing in, from the press, from Ava's suspicions, and from her own guilt. The secret she carried loomed like a slow-burning fuse, and with each threat that emerged, be it media intrusion or corporate pressure, she sensed the moment when truth would collide with revelation drawing ever closer. The next few days passed in a blur of relentless phone calls, evasive corporate statements, and hushed corridors. Claire tried her best to shield Lily from the uproar swirling outside. Every time the child switched on the TV, Claire discreetly guided her toward cartoons, steering her away from the 24-hour news channels that occasionally mentioned the Sterling name. Despite the turmoil, Lily's health held steady. She managed small walks around the estate gardens with Claire, her face lighting up whenever she spotted a new bloom. "Isn't this rose so pretty?" she'd exclaim, bending to smell the petals. Mrs. Henley kept watch from a short distance, ready to intervene if Lily's strength flagged. Meanwhile, Marcus and Gregory spent hours conferring with lawyers on how to counter the invasive gossip headlines. One afternoon, Lily and Claire were sitting on a wooden bench in the shade of an old oak tree, flipping through a book on butterflies. Lily traced the images with her finger, daydreaming aloud about visiting a butterfly sanctuary. Claire nodded, promising they would try it once Dr. Winston gave the all-clear. Suddenly, they heard urgent footsteps on the garden path. Gregory approached, his expression a tapestry of relief and anxiety. "Claire, we need you. Marcus wants you in the study. There's a reporter at the gates demanding a statement." Claire tensed. "He wants me there." Gregory gave a quick nod. "He trusts you. He's worried the reporter might spin any response he gives. But if you're present, you can stress Lily's progress in a caring, non-sensational way." Claire glanced at Lily, who'd grown quiet. "You stay with Mrs. Henley, okay?" Lily's eyes showed a flash of fear. "They're not going to take pictures of me, are they?" Claire knelt, taking Lily's hands. "No, sweetie, not if we can help it." "You're safe." With that, Claire hurried inside. In the study, she found Marcus pacing near the window, peering through the curtains at the gate below. A lone journalist waited, camera slung over one shoulder, flanked by a security guard. Marcus turned at Claire's entrance, rubbing his temples. "This reporter claims she has a copy of Lily's pediatric test results, allegedly leaked, which is impossible, as far as I know." Claire's stomach lurched. "What do we do?" He lowered his hand, eyes flicking to Gregory, who'd just entered. "We'll deny any false claims, but we can't pretend Lily isn't ill. Everyone knows she has a rare condition. The question is how to respond without inflaming rumors." Claire recalled her conversation with Lily in the garden. The child's fear of media intrusion haunted her. Could we offer a simple statement that Lily's stable and that we appreciate privacy during her recovery? Something gentle but firm. Marcus nodded. That's what I was thinking. But the reporter insists on seeing Lily. She wants proof we're not hiding something worse. Anger flared in Claire's chest. That's invasive. And Lily is not a spectacle. We refuse. That's what I told security, Marcus confirmed, exhaling heavily. They're holding her outside. She won't leave until she gets some statement. Gregory cleared his throat. Let me handle the formal press release. Marcus, you and Claire can stay inside. You shouldn't have to face her in person. Marcus seemed torn. He wanted to protect Lily, but also quell the rumors. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed, giving Gregory a curt nod. Yes, handle it. I'm done entertaining these vultures. The next hour felt like a standoff. Claire stayed with Marcus in the study, both of them anxiously awaiting word from security. Through the window, she spotted Gregory calmly addressing the reporter, who scribbled notes, her face stoic. Finally, she snapped a few pictures of the estate gates and walked away, shoulders tense. Gregory returned, looking drained. She's gone, for now, though I doubt this is over. She claimed a high-level source within Sterling Enterprises has been feeding her information. Marcus's gaze hardened. Ava. Claire felt a chill. It made sense. Ava was close enough to glean inside details, and her ambitions sometimes outweighed her loyalty. Yet accusing her outright could be a dangerous move. We don't know that for certain, Gregory cautioned. But if she is, we need to be careful. She could be setting this up to destabilize your leadership. Marcus sank into his desk chair, expression grim. I can't focus on boardroom politics while Lily's health is at stake, Claire approached, her concern evident. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out, but let's keep Lily out of the spotlight. That's all that matters. In that moment, Claire realized they'd achieved a small victory, turning the reporter away without exposing Lily. Yet it was a tenuous triumph. Secrets still lurked, including the one she carried. If Ava was truly fueling leaks, no aspect of the Sterling family would remain safe for long. As the day wore on, Claire and Marcus managed to share a fleeting sense of defiance. They wouldn't be bullied into revealing Lily to the world. Though the walls felt like they were closing in, a glimmer of unity bound them. In those resolute looks, they silently promised to shield Lily, no matter the cost. A subdued tension settled over the Sterling household in the days following the reporter's confrontation. Everyone seemed on edge, awaiting the next blow. Lily, too young to grasp the intricacies of media drama, sensed the unease in the adults and became quieter, withdrawing into books and coloring pages. Claire devoted herself to Lily's routine, medications, light exercises, and tutoring sessions. In the evenings, they read classic children's stories, or Claire would share gentle lullabies that reminded her vaguely of the foster mothers she'd known. Though Lily's health remained relatively stable, Dr. Winston cautioned against complacency. Her immune system is still fragile, he warned after a home visit. Stress can aggravate her condition. After the doctor left, Claire found Marcus in the sunroom, staring into the distance as autumn leaves swirled across the lawn. She approached gently, sensing his turmoil. "Lily's doing okay," she said, trying to offer comfort. He nodded, though his eyes stayed fixed on the window. "I know," he whispered. "But for how long?" She placed a hand on his arm. "One day at a time." "That's all any of us can do." Marcus turned to face her, an intensity in his gaze. "I'm starting to think that all this corporate chaos, the board's demands, Ava's maneuvers, maybe I should step back, at least temporarily. Focus entirely on Lily." Claire recalled how fiercely he clung to his position when she first arrived. the unstoppable billionaire who ran an empire. That he was now considering stepping away spoke volumes about his mental state. "It might give you the peace you need," she said gently, "and Lily too." Before Marcus could respond, Gregory's voice rang out from the hallway. "Marcus, there's an urgent board meeting. Ava wants you there in person." Marcus's expression hardened. Claire squeezed his hand in encouragement, then watched him leave. She suspected the meeting could be another battleground. 2 hours later, as Lily napped, Claire paced the foyer restlessly. The quiet house felt claustrophobic, weighed down by unspoken worries. She found herself drifting toward the study. Perhaps she'd straighten up, occupy her mind with something mundane. Inside, dust motes floated in rays of afternoon sun. On the imposing desk sat an old leather-bound book that made her pause, one of Elizabeth's journals. She recognized it from the few glimpses she'd caught before. She'd never dared open it, but the weight of her curiosity pressed down. Carefully, she lifted the cover. Elegant handwriting filled the pages. Initial entries detailed Elizabeth's college experiences, meeting Marcus, her hopes for the future. Claire's heart thudded as she skimmed phrases about family secrets and the child my parents never mentioned. Could that be Claire herself? A sudden noise in the hallway jolted her upright. She slammed the book shut, pulse racing. Mrs. Henley appeared in the doorway. Her gaze darted from Claire's startled expression to the journal. "Claire," she began softly, "I see you've found Elizabeth's old diary." Claire's throat constricted. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked." Mrs. Henley approached, her eyes kind but concerned. "It's not my place to say what you can or can't read, but if you're searching for answers about Elizabeth, you might find more questions than comfort." Tears threatened to blur Claire's vision. "I feel like I'm living a lie, Mrs. Henley. She stopped short, the confession trembling on her lips. Before she could speak further, raised voices echoed from the front door. Ava, Marcus. Their argument cut through the stillness. Claire and Mrs. Henley rushed to the foyer. Ava stood by the open door, posture rigid. Marcus faced her, fists clenched at his sides. She spoke in a clipped tone. "The board will not accept your indefinite leave. They want you to prove your stability or step down permanently. They're concerned about Lily's condition, distracting you from running the company." Marcus's voice shook with anger. "My daughter's health is more important than a corporate power play. If they want me out, so be it, but I won't be cornered." Ava's eyes flickered with triumph or frustration. It was hard to tell. "You'll regret this decision, Marcus. Once you lose your seat, you lose control over the direction of Sterling Enterprises." Marcus snorted. "If that's what it takes to protect Lily, fine." He turned to find Claire and Mrs. Henley watching. His tension softened a fraction, replaced by weary resolve. "Ava, we're done here." She spun on her heel, storming out. The door slammed behind her, the echo resonating through the foyer. Mrs. Henley retreated, giving Marcus and Claire a moment. Claire felt the house vibrate with a sense of impending crisis. Marcus exhaled heavily, eyes shut, as if he were fighting back the urge to shatter something. "This is it," he murmured. "A showdown with the board, with the press, everything." Quietly, Claire moved closer. "You're not alone." He opened his eyes, the weight of his despair visible. "Stay with Lily tonight. She'll need you if I can't shield her from the fallout." His words sent a chill through Claire, underscoring how precarious the situation had become. The press, Ava's machinations, and the corporate board's pressure were pushing Marcus to his breaking point. Meanwhile, Claire's own secret hovered in the background, a time bomb set to explode if revealed at the wrong moment. She nodded, stepping closer to gently place a hand on his arm. "I'll protect her. I promise." In the silence that followed, the fear between them was palpable. Though they stood in the sanctuary of the Sterling home, it felt as though the ground beneath them was shifting. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Marcus's fate with the company, but the future of Lily's care, and if Claire couldn't hold back the truth much longer, the fate of the family itself. Claire stared at the leather-bound diary on Marcus's desk, her heart hammering as she recalled the brief sentences she had read. The ornate cover, weathered by time, seemed to beckon her with unspoken secrets. Though she longed to devour every word, she held back, weighed down by the risks. Lily's well-being came first, always. Still, the words she'd seen haunted her. Hints of Elizabeth's deep sorrow over a sister she'd never met. A child given away before Elizabeth was old enough to understand. Claire felt certain that Elizabeth's sister was, in fact, herself. Every moment in this house only strengthened that conviction. But admitting it to Marcus now, when he was at odds with the board, Ava and the media, could be catastrophic. Outside the study, the sky rumbled as though mirroring the turmoil inside the mansion. Rain had started to lash against the windows, and thunder rattled the distant horizon. Lily was resting upstairs, drifting in and out of sleep. Mrs. Henley checked on her every few minutes, leaving Claire alone to wrestle with her conscience. Gazing out the study window, Claire caught sight of Marcus pacing across the lawn, umbrella in hand, phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his posture. Word had come from Gregory that Ava was pushing for an emergency board vote within the next 48 hours. If the majority sided with her, Marcus would be forced to step down as CEO, effectively losing control of the empire he'd built. The question weighed heavy. Did any of that matter more than Lily's health and happiness? Marcus had hinted he might willingly relinquish power if it meant protecting his daughter, but the man had also poured his life into sterling enterprises. Watching everything crumble couldn't be easy. Returning her attention to the journal, Claire tentatively opened it again, flipping to the pages where Elizabeth wrote about the sister my parents never acknowledged. Elizabeth's handwriting looped elegantly across the paper. I feel like part of me is missing. My mother's health during pregnancy was delicate, and they said it was a complicated birth. It happened before I was even old enough to question anything. But I've found adoption papers hidden away, and I wonder if someday I'll meet her. Claire's throat tightened. Elizabeth had yearned for her too. The pain in those words was palpable, like two siblings separated by forces beyond their control. Tears prickled the corners of Claire's eyes. She could almost picture Elizabeth standing in this very study, longing for the day they might reunite. As footsteps sounded in the hall, Claire snapped the diary shut and slid it under a stack of papers. The study door opened to reveal Marcus, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead. Water droplets fell to the polished floor. He gave her a startled look. "Claire, I wasn't expecting anyone in here." She rose to her feet, forcing a neutral expression. "I saw you outside and got worried about the storm." "Are you all right?" Marcus shook out his umbrella, visibly annoyed. "I'm fine. Just got off the phone with Gregory. The board meeting is set for tomorrow morning. Ava's insisting we resolve this leadership crisis immediately." Claire's gaze flicked to his damp sleeves. "Let me grab you a towel." She slipped out, returning with one from the downstairs linen closet. As he dried off, she steeled herself. "Marcus, if you decide it's best to step away from the company, is that really such a terrible thing? Lily—" His voice cut in, low and strained. "I know. Lily needs me. But Sterling Enterprises was Elizabeth's dream too. She helped shape it, in her own way, her ideas, her philanthropic vision. I don't want to see it twisted into something unrecognizable." Claire reached out, resting a hand on his arm. She was acutely aware of the journal beneath the documents behind her. "If the board forces you out, you can still honor Elizabeth's memory," You can channel your resources into Lily's care or her future. There are other ways to preserve Elizabeth's legacy without wearing yourself down. He met her gaze, his eyes clouded with conflicting emotions. You sound so certain. I'm not certain of anything, she confessed softly. I just know Lily deserves a father who isn't consumed by corporate battles, and you deserve a chance to heal too. Marcus's shoulders sagged. He gave a faint nod, then exhaled a shaky breath. Let me clean up. I need to check on Lily before I make any more calls. After he left, Claire stared at the diary again, her heart pounding. Was now the time to tell Marcus about her connection to Elizabeth? The very possibility nearly stole her breath. If revealed, it could bring them closer or tear them all apart. Swallowing hard, she picked up the diary and returned it to a nearby drawer, carefully tucking it away. She had no desire to hide it permanently, but the timing still felt wrong. There was too much at stake: Lily's emotional stability, Marcus's precarious state. The thunder growled again, vibrating the glass panes. Claire closed her eyes, inhaling the faint smell of the old book and rain-drenched air. Somewhere beneath the storm clouds, Elizabeth's spirit seemed to beckon her to be brave. A truth had been revealed to her, one that Elizabeth had longed to share. Now Claire held it, trembling, in her own hands. Whatever happened in the coming days, there would be no turning back. A restless night gave way to a tentative calm. The storm had passed, leaving glistening puddles along the Sterling Mansion's driveway and a pale sun peeking through thinning clouds. Yet the household's tension remained. Everyone knew the board meeting loomed like a final judgment. Claire woke early, determined to be ready for whatever might unfold. She found Lily in the living room, curled up in a corner of the couch. The child smiled weakly, a stuffed rabbit hugged close to her chest. "Morning," Lily said. "Daddy left really early." Claire nodded, sitting beside her. "He had an important meeting, but he'll be back soon." She gently checked Lily's forehead. No fever. The child's color looked better than it had in days. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Lily admitted, stifling a small yawn. "But I wanted to be awake when Daddy comes home, so I can tell him he doesn't have to worry about me." A lump formed in Claire's throat. "He'll love to hear that." After she'd settled Lily with breakfast and a coloring book, Claire retreated to the kitchen, where Mrs. Henley prepared tea. The aroma of chamomile filled the air, a soothing balm against the house's collective anxiety. Mrs. Henley offered a gentle smile. "You look like you barely slept." Claire accepted the cup gratefully. "Too much on my mind." A sympathetic nod. "Marcus will sort it out. That boy's strong. He's faced adversity before." Claire sipped her tea. "I'm more worried about him facing it alone." Mrs. Henley's eyes flicked to the window, where a car pulling into the driveway caught her attention. "Looks like he's back. Let's hope it's good news." Claire hurried to the foyer just as Marcus stepped inside. He paused, scanning the hallway for Lily, before his gaze settled on Claire. She noticed his tie was slightly askew, his hair ruffled, as though he'd run his hands through it multiple times. "Daddy!" Lily's excited voice preceded her as she scurried over. She hugged his legs, and he carefully scooped her up, mindful of her fragile condition. "Hey, princess," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I missed you." Claire observed the tender exchange, heart-warming, though the tension in Marcus's eyes was unmistakable. As Lily recounted her morning, Claire offered to take her back to the couch so Marcus could catch his breath. He, however, shook his head. "It's fine. I want Lily to hear this too." "She deserves honesty." Lily clutched his lapel, her voice small. "Is something bad happening, Daddy?" Marcus glanced at Claire, who nodded encouragingly. He set Lily down gently on the couch, then knelt so they were eye to eye. Claire sat beside them, her hand lightly resting on Lily's shoulder. "I had a meeting with the board," Marcus began, exhaling. "They're worried about the company's direction. Some members, led by Ava, voted to remove me as CEO." Lily's eyes glistened with confusion. "So, does that mean you don't work there anymore?" Marcus forced a small, reassuring smile. "It means I won't be running Sterling Enterprises the same way, but I'm still part of it. I still own shares, and I can still guide some decisions. It's complicated." Claire's chest tightened. She thought of how much the company symbolized to Marcus, a bond with Elizabeth, a testament to his ambition. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she whispered. He rose, letting out a long breath. "Don't be. In some ways, it's a relief. I'll have more time for Lily. I won't be under constant scrutiny." Lily sniffed, hugging her stuffed rabbit tighter. "But you seem sad." A soft chuckle escaped him. "Maybe a little. I put a lot into that company. But it's time I put even more into us, into this family, into your health." He gently stroked Lily's hair. "I love you, and I'm going to make sure you get well, no matter what." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes. She felt the swell of affection in the room, a sense of unity she hadn't experienced in her own childhood. Lily nestled against her father, and Claire found herself placing a reassuring hand on Marcus's arm. "Mrs." Henley peered in from the kitchen doorway, a look of relief and acceptance on her face. She hadn't always approved of Marcus's single-minded devotion to work, and now it seemed like a new chapter was beginning. When Lily dozed off for an afternoon nap, Claire followed Marcus into the adjoining study, half expecting him to crumble. Instead, he paced the room with an air of determination. "I've relinquished my position, but I haven't surrendered everything," he said quietly, glancing at her. "I can still influence the board's decisions from behind the scenes, and if Ava thinks she can steamroll me, she's mistaken." Claire nodded, admiration tinged with worry. "Just promise you won't let revenge overshadow what matters." He paused, meeting her gaze. "What matters is Lily, and you." Then, almost shyly, he added, "I mean, your role here. You've become indispensable." Heat rushed to Claire's cheeks, but before she could respond, Lily's soft call drifted in from the living room, reminding them both of their priorities. They hurried to her side, leaving the question of the future to linger like the settling calm after a fierce storm. The next morning brought a fragile sense of normalcy. Without the weight of daily board meetings, Marcus spent more time at home, personally overseeing Lily's medication and cheering her on during physical therapy exercises. Claire observed how his entire demeanor shifted. He was still guarded, still bore the marks of past grief, but flashes of warmth surfaced more often. After Lily's midday rest, Claire found Marcus in the garden, wearing casual clothes instead of his usual suit. He was pruning a row of rose bushes Elizabeth had planted years ago. The sun caught flecks of grey in his hair, highlighting the lines of worry that lingered at his temples. Yet he moved with a renewed sense of purpose, each snip of the pruning shears deliberate as though carving out a fresh start. Claire approached quietly. "You have a talent for gardening." He glanced up, offering a subdued smile. "Elizabeth loved these roses. She taught me everything I know about taking care of them." Setting aside the shears, he shook out stray leaves from his hands. "I still feel her presence here sometimes." Claire knelt beside him, noticing the rich scent of the flowers. They were a testament to Elizabeth's enduring presence, a life cut short, but still blossoming in small ways. "I'm glad you find comfort in her memory," she said gently. He gave a slight nod. "I've been thinking about telling Lily more about her mother. I tried to protect her by not talking too much about Elizabeth, but maybe that was a mistake." Claire reached out, her fingertips grazing a rose petal. Talking might help Lily feel closer to her mom, even if she doesn't remember everything. Marcus sighed, the tension returning to his shoulders. I'm just not sure I'm ready. Every time I mention Elizabeth, the pain feels fresh. Steeling herself, Claire decided to probe a bit. What if there were things about Elizabeth you didn't know? Would you want to learn them now? Confusion flickered in his eyes. What do you mean? Her heart pounded. She'd been edging closer to the truth for weeks, but once again, the moment felt too precarious. I just wondered if discovering something new, like a journal or letters, would help or hurt. His lips pressed into a thin line. I suppose it depends on what I'd find. Some secrets might be best left buried. Claire could almost hear the unspoken plea, let the past rest. Yet every passing day made her own silence feel more like betrayal. She forced a small smile. You're probably right, she murmured, though guilt tugged at her heart. A moment later, Lily's voice carried from the house. Dad, Claire, I'm done with my exercises. They looked at each other, relief breaking the tension. Marcus replaced the shears on a workbench. Let's see how our little champion is doing. Inside, Lily stood near a mat in the living room where Dr. Winston supervised her physical therapy. Her cheeks were flushed, but she wore a triumphant grin. I walked 5 laps around the mat without getting dizzy, Claire clapped, beaming. Marcus ruffled Lily's hair. That's wonderful, princess. Dr. Winston made a few notes on his clipboard. She's improving steadily. Her resilience is remarkable, but let's not overdo it. Rest is still key. Lily tilted her head at Marcus. Can we go outside for a little bit? He exchanged a glance with Dr. Winston, who nodded. 20 minutes in the garden won't hurt, as long as she's careful. Soon, the 3 of them, Lily, Marcus, and Claire, strolled along the garden's stone path. Leaves rustled overhead, and a warm autumn sun lit the scene. Lily occasionally paused to marvel at the roses or pick up a fallen leaf. Her laughter, once rare, now rang with growing confidence. At one point, Lily slipped her hand into Claire's. The small gesture melted Claire's heart. She caught Marcus watching them, a tenderness in his gaze that sent warmth spiraling through her chest. For a moment, it was easy to forget all the turmoil swirling outside these garden walls. But reality intruded soon enough. Gregory emerged from the house, phone in hand. Marcus, that was one of the senior board members. Ava is pushing for immediate changes in the philanthropic budgets. She claims your plans for pediatric funding need reassessment. Marcus's jaw tightened. She's moving fast. Gregory offered an apologetic shrug. We can set up a meeting to push back, but you'll need a clear proposal if you want to maintain the funding for children's health initiatives. Once you step down, they can revisit every decision you made. Claire recognized the dismay on Marcus's face. This was the philanthropic side Elizabeth had once championed, the side that aligned perfectly with Lily's medical struggles. If Ava cut that funding, countless families would suffer. Lily blinked up at them. You said you don't work there anymore, Daddy, but you still can help kids like me, right? Marcus forced a resolute smile, brushing Lily's hair aside. I'll find a way, sweetheart. I promise. Claire's heart clenched. She admired his determination, but she also sensed the heartbreak and frustration behind it. She squeezed Lily's hand, vowing silently to stand by them both. Yet the question remained, how long could she keep her own secrets locked away, while the man she was growing to care for struggled to uphold the legacy of a woman who might have been her sister? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the estate. Lily, exhausted from her day's exercises, had gone to bed early. Mrs. Henley busied herself in the kitchen, preparing tea, while Marcus and Claire found themselves alone in the living room. A quiet settled between them that felt heavier than usual, charged with unspoken thoughts. Marcus gazed at the fire crackling in the ornate hearth, the dance of flames reflected in his eyes, highlighting an intensity Claire couldn't ignore. She settled onto the sofa, smoothing her dress over her knees, waiting for him to speak. "I've been thinking," he began, voice subdued, "about why you came here." Her pulse quickened. "You hired me to take care of Lily, remember?" His lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "That part is obvious, but I mean, you had other offers from what Gregory told me. A few families in need of specialized childcare. And yet you chose this one." She gripped the sofa cushion. Was he on the verge of discovering her motive, or merely curious? "I had a feeling I could help Lily," she said slowly, trying to walk the line between truth and concealment. Marcus nodded, expression unreadable. "You've done more than help. You've changed everything." A flicker of warmth touched her cheeks, but guilt coiled in her stomach. She wished she could believe that was enough, that her presence was entirely selfless, yet the diary and the study, the suspicion gnawing at her, it all painted a more complicated picture. Feeling her nerves flare, she diverted her gaze to the mantel, where a framed photograph of Elizabeth and baby Lily still held a place of honor. "I'm sorry about your position at the company," she said softly. "I know it was important to you and Elizabeth." His face clouded, but he nodded. "It was, however, I'm starting to realize there's more to life than board votes and share prices. For years, I let the company fill the void Elizabeth left behind. And Lily, well, I tried to do right by her, but maybe I haven't always been present in the way she needed." Claire's chest tightened. "You've done your best. She knows you love her." Marcus exhaled, steadying himself. "Love can be complicated, though, can't it? It's mixed with regret, fear, longing, kind of like how I feel about my past right now." She swallowed, mind racing. If ever there was a moment to come clean, perhaps this was it. But the words tangled in her throat. How to say, "I'm Elizabeth's sister," how to risk shattering the fragile trust they'd built. As if sensing her turmoil, Marcus moved closer, his tone quiet. "Claire, you've become so important. To Lily and to me. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, if Elizabeth were here, would she approve of how things are unfolding? Would she accept that I might—" He stopped, face turning red. She felt her heart pound, a wave of conflicting emotions swirling. Was he suggesting romantic feelings, or was this just the loneliness speaking? She gripped the cushion harder, words failing her. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, collecting himself. "We shouldn't tread that path yet," he murmured. "Not while Lily's life is still so uncertain." He rose abruptly, pacing toward the window. "I'm sorry. This is all too complicated." Claire stood, crossing the room to him. She placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. "It's all right to feel things, Marcus. We're human. But you're right, Lily's health, your transition from the company. We need to handle those first." He turned, gaze heavy with gratitude and something deeper. "You're a better person than I deserve right now." She started to protest, but he gently shook his head. "I mean it." Before the moment could stretch into something undeniable, footsteps approached. Mrs. Henley entered, carrying a tea tray. "I thought a hot drink might calm the nerves," she said, setting it on a side table. Her eyes flickered between the two, curiosity evident, but she made no comment. Marcus retreated, accepting a cup of tea. Claire did the same, her hand trembling slightly. She longed to speak her truth, to share the confessions that weighed on her heart. Yet Lily's face danced through her mind. How would the child handle such a revelation? And would it break Marcus's fragile balance? She glanced at Mrs. Henley, who gave an encouraging, if subtle, nod, as though sensing the battle waging inside Claire. Perhaps, In time, there would be a moment to reveal everything. For now, the hush between them echoed with all that remained unsaid, each of them seeking the courage to find a path forward. Even as the warmth of the tea soothed her throat, Claire felt a chill of anticipation. Hidden truths and fragile hearts could only remain at peace for so long. Late the next afternoon, the hush of impending confrontation swept through the Sterling mansion. A phone call from Dr. Winston had rattled everyone. Lily's latest blood test showed a dip in her immune markers. While not an emergency, it signaled a potential setback. Marcus paced the length of the living room, checking his watch every few moments as they awaited the doctor's arrival. Claire sat with Lily on the couch, trying to keep the child distracted with a simple board game. She could sense Lily's worry. Her small fingers fidgeted with the game pieces, and her eyes darted to her father's agitated figure. Before long, Dr. Winston let himself in, greeting Mrs. Henley briefly at the door. He carried a slim black bag and wore an expression of calm that Claire found momentarily reassuring. "Let's see how our patient is doing," he said, offering Lily a kind smile. Marcus hovered, arms folded. "You said her immune markers dropped. Is she in danger?" The doctor knelt by the coffee table, carefully examining Lily's hands and checking for fever. "Her vitals are okay. This shift could be a blip, something we can correct with medication adjustments." But he turned serious eyes on Marcus. "It's a reminder that Lily's condition remains fragile, especially under stress. We need to keep her environment as stable as possible." Claire heard the unspoken words, the relentless press attention, the corporate turmoil. All of it threatened Lily's carefully nurtured equilibrium. Marcus's face darkened with worry, and Lily's eyes welled up. "I'm trying so hard," the child whispered. "I don't want to be sick anymore." Claire scooted closer, wrapping an arm around Lily. "Hey, you're strong. We'll do whatever we have to do to help you feel better." Mrs. Henley returned with a tray of juice. "Should I call the pharmacy about the updated meds, Doctor?" Dr. Winston nodded. "Yes, and I'll leave written instructions." Marcus took a long breath. "Thank you, Doctor. We'll handle it." He knelt, tucking a stray hair behind Lily's ear. "We're in this together, Princess." After Dr. Winston departed, Lily lay down to rest, and Mrs. Henley guided Claire and Marcus aside, keeping her voice low. "He's right about stress. We've got to shield her from any further upheaval. That includes the reporters, the corporate changes, everything." Marcus clenched his jaw. "I might not have much choice if Ava stirs up more trouble. She's been pushing for budget cuts to the pediatric initiative. She thinks it's an unnecessary legacy program of mine." "That's insane," Claire burst out, anger sparking. "Families like Lily's need that funding." "I know," Marcus said, "but with me no longer at the helm, Ava has more sway. She's using the press frenzy over Lily's health to justify rerouting funds to more profitable ventures." Frustration flickered in Claire's eyes. "What can we do?" Marcus scrubbed a hand over his face, tension radiating from him. "I still hold a significant share of the company. If I rally enough shareholders, we could override some of Ava's decisions. But it means going public, fighting back in the media. That might drag Lily further into the spotlight." A knot formed in Claire's stomach. She remembered the diaries, Elizabeth's dream of using Sterling Enterprises as a force for good, how a portion of the company's profits had always been funneled into pediatric research and charitable clinics. Elizabeth's philanthropic vision was woven into the company's identity, one of the few legacies she'd left behind. Marcus's gaze shifted to her, a glimmer of vulnerability breaking through. "I don't want Lily to suffer because of corporate politics, but I can't just stand by while everything Elizabeth and I built is dismantled." Claire felt the tug of conflicting loyalties. Above all, Lily's health came first. But protecting Elizabeth's dream and thus Lily's future mattered too. She thought of the secret she guarded and how it might shift Marcus's perspective if he knew she was part of Elizabeth's bloodline. "Maybe there's a middle ground," she suggested softly. "Some way to make your stand without turning Lily into a spectacle. Could we focus on the cause itself, on the children who benefit from these programs, rather than on Lily's personal story?" Marcus nodded, slow but receptive. "It's possible. I'd have to strategize carefully, maybe with Gregory's help. We can craft a narrative about the success of these programs, highlight general patient stories, not Lily specifically." A restless determination flickered in his eyes. Claire realized this wasn't just about corporate pride, it was about safeguarding a part of Elizabeth's spirit. In that moment, Lily's faint voice called from the couch, "Dad, Claire!" They rushed to her side. She looked small and pale against the cushions. "I'm just tired," she said, words trembling. "Don't leave me alone." Marcus clasped her hand, and Claire sat on the other side, stroking Lily's hair. "We're here," Claire reassured, her voice tight with emotion. Together they created a makeshift cocoon of blankets and pillows, ensuring Lily was warm and comfortable. Marcus read softly from a storybook, his tone calmer than his heart likely felt. Claire watched, struck by the tableau. A father fighting with everything he had, a child bravely holding on to hope, and herself, torn between her role as caretaker and her role as the lost relative who carried Elizabeth's memory in her veins. The final lines of the storybook trailed off, and Lily drifted into a light doze. Claire exchanged a glance with Marcus, each silently acknowledging the gravity of the moment. This was their ultimate test, navigating corporate strife, medical crises, and hidden truths. As night descended, the mansion fell into a hushed vigil. Marcus prepared to call Gregory, determined to preserve Elizabeth's philanthropic legacy. Claire lingered by Lily's side, heart aching with unspoken confessions. The swirling storm of secrets, corporate battles, and health struggles had converged, pushing them all toward a threshold they could no longer avoid. A gentle autumn sun poured through the windows of the Sterling mansion the following morning, illuminating a palpable shift in the household's energy. The night had been tense, with Lily's immune dip weighing on everyone's mind, but dawn brought a fresh sense of determination. Claire awoke early to the soft hum of Mrs. Henley's preparations in the kitchen, the aroma of bread and coffee drifting upstairs like a comforting promise. After dressing, Claire tiptoed to Lily's room. The child was still asleep, her breathing steady, a slight flush to her cheeks that Claire hoped signaled improving health rather than another fever. She brushed a strand of hair away from Lily's face, feeling a rush of protective love. Downstairs, Marcus stood by the kitchen counter, flipping through a stack of notes. He looked up with relief when Claire entered. "Morning," he greeted quietly, mindful not to disturb Lily. "I'm drafting a proposal for the philanthropic wing, something to present to the shareholders and the board. If I can't lead Sterling Enterprises outright, I'll at least show them why pulling pediatric funds is a grave mistake." Claire smiled, reaching for a cup of coffee. "That sounds like a solid plan. Are you presenting the data on how many children benefit? Case studies? Success stories?" He nodded, a spark lighting his eyes. "Exactly. Ava wants to talk profit margins, but I'll talk about lives saved, families supported. If enough shareholders see the moral imperative, maybe we can override any cuts she tries to impose." "That's an excellent approach," Claire said warmly. "I'd be happy to help. I've read some of the materials about the clinics and the families they serve. We can emphasize the human side of those statistics." A thin smile curved Marcus's lips. "I'd appreciate that." In the next moment, Lily's faint call drifted from the stairs. Claire and Marcus exchanged a quick, concerned glance before hurrying up to her. They found the girl sitting up in bed, eyes bright but voice subdued. "I feel a bit better today," Lily announced, though she still looked pale. "That's good news," Claire said, relieved. "Hungry for breakfast?" Lily nodded timidly. "Maybe some toast and orange juice." Marcus perched on the edge of the bed, gently squeezing Lily's hand. "Orange juice coming right up, princess." They helped Lily downstairs, where Mrs. Henley had laid out a simple breakfast. Lily ate in small bites, but her spirits lifted enough to ask questions about the day. "Are we going to the park, or are we staying home again?" Claire smoothed Lily's hair. "Let's see how you feel after lunch. If Dr. Winston thinks a short walk outside is safe, we'll do that. For now, we'll stick close to home and keep things calm." Lily made a face, half joking. "The mansion is always calm, except when Dad's on the phone." Marcus chuckled, relief evident in his voice. "Guilty as charged, but I'm here all day. No meetings in the city. We'll have some quality time." After breakfast, Lily settled on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit while Claire organized her tutoring materials for a short lesson. Meanwhile, Marcus disappeared into the study to finalize his philanthropic proposal. Whenever Claire glanced over, Lily looked content, her brow uncreased by the usual worry. It was as though the presence of both her father and her beloved Nanny, Aunt Claire secretly reminded herself, brought her a sense of security. Midway through the morning, Mrs. Henley emerged with a tray of lemon tea for Lily. She gave Claire a meaningful glance. "May we speak in the hallway for a moment, dear?" Confused but curious, Claire followed her, leaving Lily absorbed in her storybook. Outside the living room, Mrs. Henley lowered her voice. "I've seen the way you look at Elizabeth's photographs, and the questions in your eyes whenever her name comes up. I won't pry into what you discovered in her diary or why you're truly here, but I can sense it's something deep." Claire felt her cheeks grow warm. Mrs. Henley raised a gentle hand. "No need to explain if you're not ready. But if it helps, know that I believe you want what's best for Lily and Marcus. Whenever you decide to speak, I trust it'll be with a kind heart." Tears pricked Claire's eyes. She placed her hand over Mrs. Henley's in gratitude. "Thank you." Mrs. Henley's gaze softened. "You remind me a bit of Elizabeth. She had the same quiet strength. If there's a hidden bond between you two, perhaps it's time to let Marcus know. Secrets can fester, and I suspect your heart is far too kind to let that happen." Claire swallowed hard. She desperately wanted to confide in Marcus, to reveal that she was Elizabeth's sister, that she'd come to uncover the truth about the woman who died before they could ever meet. But the words felt lodged in her throat. "I'll think about it," she finally whispered. "I just need the right moment." Mrs. Henley patted Claire's shoulder. "All right, dear." In the meantime, Lily's waiting. They re-entered the living room to find Lily dozing off, the stuffed rabbit resting on her chest. Marcus, now returning from the study, stood behind the couch, observing his daughter with a mixture of love and anxiety. When his gaze flicked to Claire and Mrs. Henley, he seemed to sense something in their expressions, but he didn't question it. He simply nodded and turned back to Lily. Claire settled beside Lily, heart heavy but resolved. A path to healing, she realized, meant more than just Lily's medical care. It required honesty, vulnerability, and trust among everyone who loved her. With Mrs. Henley's quiet encouragement, Claire felt the first glimmer of courage that would guide her to reveal the truth, no matter how complicated, when the moment was right. For the remainder of the week, a gentle rhythm settled in. Marcus and Claire worked side by side on the philanthropic presentation, carefully compiling data on how Elizabeth's pediatric fund had saved lives and improved the futures of countless children. Each story they read, families grappling with serious illnesses, children regaining hope, reminded them why fighting for those funds mattered. In the quieter moments, Claire found herself drawn to Elizabeth's diary. She hadn't opened it again, aware of the emotional weight it carried. But the temptation lingered, pulling at her heart every time she passed by the study. She knew the final pieces of her lineage waited in those pages. She also sensed the day she'd share this secret with Marcus was drawing near. Lily's health remained precarious but stable. While she never fully regained the robust energy of a typical 7-year-old, her curiosity bubbled through. She asked more questions about her mother, wanting to know details, Elizabeth's favorite color, her favorite lullaby. Marcus offered answers in measured doses, and Claire added small stories gleaned from the diary. Not outright revelations, but gentle anecdotes that painted a warmer picture of Elizabeth than Lily had ever known. One morning, Mrs. Henley approached Marcus and Claire with a proposition. "We've been cooped up in this house for ages. Lily's well enough for a short drive. Why not take her to the Butterfly Conservatory on the outskirts of Boston? I recall Lily mentioning she'd like to see butterflies." A smile broke across Claire's face. Lily had indeed dreamed of a butterfly sanctuary. Marcus's hesitation was brief but palpable, fear of Lily overexerting herself. Still, Dr. Winston had advocated small outings, and the conservatory was known for controlled indoor conditions, perfect for a child with a delicate immune system. Within the hour, they carefully prepared for the trip. Mrs. Henley packed a small bag of Lily's meds and masks, while Marcus arranged a private car to minimize exposure to crowds. Claire helped Lily dress in a soft sweater, her eyes glowing with excitement. Once all was ready, they piled into the car, Gregory at the wheel, heading out of Boston's bustle toward the conservatory's peaceful enclave. During the ride, Lily leaned against Claire, pointing out the window at passing trees and distant skylines. Every now and then, she'd look up at Marcus, her face alight with a kind of childish wonder that momentarily erased all her fears. Claire felt her own tension melt under Lily's optimism. Even Marcus seemed more relaxed, occasionally rolling down the window to let in a crisp autumn breeze. They reached the conservatory in late morning. Inside, warm, humid air greeted them, mingled with the scent of tropical plants. Lily's eyes widened as a kaleidoscope of butterflies flitted around glass-enclosed gardens. The caretaker, a gentle older woman, smiled at Lily's delight. "If you stand very still, a butterfly might land on you." Marcus carefully guided Lily to a bench, ensuring she had a place to rest if she felt dizzy. Claire stood beside them, drinking in the tranquil scene, lush greenery, the soft flutter of wings, the hush of other visitors taking in the wonder. One large blue butterfly circled overhead, then drifted down toward Lily, landing on the tip of her outstretched finger. Lily's giggle echoed through the space, pure and bright. Marcus watched, his face a mixture of relief and quiet joy. Claire couldn't help smiling too, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. For a moment, it felt like a new beginning, a glimpse of normalcy in the midst of turmoil. Yet, even amid the beauty, Claire felt the weight of the secret she carried. This tender scene with Lily and Marcus deserved honesty. The diary's words about an unknown sister tugged at her heart. During a lull, while Lily sat enthralled by a tiny yellow butterfly perched on her shoulder, Claire gently touched Marcus's arm. "She's so happy. Thank you for bringing her here." He nodded, gaze never leaving Lily. "Seeing her like this makes every struggle worth it." His voice was thick with emotion. Claire inhaled deeply. "There's something I need to tell you about Elizabeth." She paused, heart thundering as the vow she'd made to Mrs. Henley pressed upon her. But at that moment, Lily called out, "Dad, Claire, come see this big orange one." Her voice rang with excitement, cutting short Claire's confession. Marcus offered a gentle, almost apologetic smile. "Tell me later. Let's enjoy this. Just a little while longer." Claire nodded, following him over to where Lily marveled at a cluster of butterflies dancing around bright tropical flowers. She vowed silently that she wouldn't delay the truth much more. The time for partial confessions and half-hidden diary entries was ending. Eventually, the three of them returned to the car, Lily clutching a souvenir booklet from the conservatory, her cheeks glowing with the thrill of the day. As they drove home, Marcus's hand found Claire's for a brief moment, a silent gesture of gratitude and connection. In that single touch, Claire felt how deeply woven together they'd become, through Lily, through Elizabeth's memory, and soon, through the unvarnished truth she could no longer keep locked away. Back at the Sterling mansion, the air felt lighter, buoyed by the success of Lily's outing. Though Dr. Winston reminded them to remain vigilant, he also praised the positive effect of a gentle excursion. Lily retreated to her room, humming softly with her new butterfly booklet in hand. Claire busied herself arranging fresh flowers in a vase. The day had been a triumph of sorts, but an undercurrent of urgency still flowed through her. Each passing hour felt like a reminder that she was living a borrowed identity, omitting a key piece of her past. And the more she cared for Marcus and Lily, the harder it became to deceive them by silence. She found Marcus in the study, scanning through documents for the philanthropic presentation he planned to pitch to the board shareholders. He looked up as she entered, relief mingling with a trace of exhaustion. "Lily's resting?" Claire nodded, setting the vase on a side table. "She's flipping through her butterfly book. I think she'll fall asleep soon." He closed the folder on his desk, leaning back in the chair. "Thank you for today. I haven't seen her that happy in a while." "It was wonderful," Claire agreed. A lull followed, the hush of many thoughts left unspoken. She steeled herself. "Marcus, I really do need to talk to you about Elizabeth." His brow furrowed, curiosity blooming. "What is it? Did you find something in her old belongings?" She approached the desk, nerves flaring. "Yes, diaries, notes. I've been reading them, trying to understand her better." She hesitated, the words tangling in her throat. She wrote about a sister, someone given up for adoption, someone she never met. Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to confusion, then a quiet dread. "I know Elizabeth had suspicions that her parents hid a pregnancy before she was born, but we never had solid proof. She tried to investigate once, but her mother denied everything." Claire exhaled shakily. "She found adoption papers. She wrote about them in her diary. She believed she had a sister out there somewhere. And, Marcus, I think I'm that sister." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. The gentle ticking of a nearby grandfather clock amplified the tension. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it as though the words had abandoned him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You are Elizabeth's sister." She could only nod, eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't know until recently. I discovered records hinting I was adopted as a baby, then recognized Elizabeth's name. That's why I applied for the nanny position. I needed to know what happened to her, to see if she was truly my sister." Marcus shot to his feet, chair scraping against the floor. Anger, betrayal, and shock rippled across his face. "So you've been hiding this all along?" His voice shook with a bitterness that cut deep. "You came here under false pretenses." Claire's eyes welled up. "I never meant to deceive you. At first, I wasn't sure. Then, as Lily's condition worsened and you trusted me, I didn't know how to tell you without risking everything." He raked a hand through his hair. "Everything, meaning your job or my sanity?" Her voice trembled. "No, your trust. Lily's sense of security. I've grown to love her so much, and I couldn't bear to hurt her." Marcus turned away, pacing the study, breathing hard. Elizabeth's sister. He stopped at the window, gripping the sill. I see pieces of her in you now. Why didn't I notice sooner? Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. I'm sorry, truly. I came looking for answers about Elizabeth, and then I found Lily and you. I realized I wanted to help this family, not destroy it. Marcus faced her again, eyes red with contained emotion. You should have told me. We could have faced this together. Sobs choked her words. I was afraid you'd hate me for invading your life under a guise. He closed the distance between them, fists clenched at his sides. I don't hate you, but I feel betrayed. Confused, pain flashed across his features. Elizabeth always hoped to find her sister one day. She never got that chance. Claire nodded, tears flowing freely. I wish things were different. I wish I had met her. I never meant to replace her. I just needed to know who I was. For a long moment, neither spoke. A swirl of emotions vibrated in the silent study. Grief, relief, longing, anger. Finally, Marcus's shoulders slumped, his eyes moist. We owe it to Lily and to Elizabeth's memory to sort this out, but this changes everything. She nodded, voice soft. I know. At that moment, Lily's faint voice echoed down the hallway. Dad? Claire? Where are you? Marcus tensed, exchanging a look with Claire. She wiped her tears hastily, both of them realizing that Lily's world was about to change as well. Steeling themselves, they left the study to comfort the child who unknowingly connected them all. The revelation, at last, was out. Whether it would heal them or shatter them remained uncertain, but a door once shut was now forever opened, flooding the mansion with a light both painful and transformative. Tension gripped the house in the wake of Claire's confession. Marcus's initial shock had hardened into a pensive silence, while Lily remained unaware of the seismic shift beneath her feet. For 2 days, Claire tiptoed around the mansion, waiting for Marcus to indicate how he wanted to proceed. She half expected him to demand she pack her bags and leave. Yet no such directive came, only a quiet distance that ached more than open conflict. At the end of the 2nd day, Gregory arrived with urgent news. The shareholders' meeting to finalize the pediatric fund's fate would occur tomorrow. Marcus stood in the foyer, listening as Gregory explained that Ava intended to slash the budget dramatically. Claire lingered nearby, heart pounding. This was the initiative Elizabeth had championed, the one that had offered hope to so many families, even beyond Lily's condition. I need to attend that meeting, Marcus said firmly, shrugging into his jacket. I might not be CEO anymore, but I still have a voice. He paused, glancing toward Claire, who hovered by the staircase. Are you coming? Her throat constricted. Days earlier, he had included her in everything. Now the question felt charged. Did he still trust her input, or was this mere politeness? I'll go if you want me there, she managed. His nod was curt, but not unkind. Your perspective matters. The next morning, they left Lily with Mrs. Henley, who assured them Lily was stable enough to be without them for a few hours. Claire rode alongside Marcus in a subdued hush, the city's skyline looming ahead, traffic lights reflecting off glossy buildings. He kept his eyes forward, revealing little of his thoughts. They reached the towering Sterling Enterprises headquarters, where a string of black cars parked near the entrance signaled the presence of high-profile shareholders. Claire trailed Marcus into a sleek conference room on the top floor, her nerves jangling. Ava was already there, poised in a tailored suit, exuding confidence. Several board members milled about, some greeting Marcus with polite nods, others avoiding eye contact. Ava wasted no time. Thank you all for attending, she began crisply. Our agenda is to review expenditures in the charitable arm, specifically pediatric health funding. She clicked through a slideshow projecting onto a large screen. As you can see, the ROI on these programs is negligible. Marcus shot to his feet. ROI is not the sole metric for philanthropic efforts. This fund has saved children's lives, offered medical grants, and improved countless families' situations. Ava fixed him with a patronizing stare. We must consider the company's bottom line. With the recent turmoil, stockholders want to see higher profitability. Emotions can't dictate resource allocation. Claire swallowed her frustration, stepping forward. Pardon me, Ms. Morgan, but these programs do more than serve a feel-good purpose. They're part of the reason many regard Sterling Enterprises as a socially responsible leader. Cutting them would not only harm children but also tarnish the company's reputation. Ava's gaze flickered with annoyance. And you are... Claire lifted her chin. Someone who's seen firsthand how vital this funding is, both for Lily and for other kids with rare illnesses. The room quieted, the mention of Lily a subtle reminder of Marcus's personal connection. Then a reedy-voiced shareholder interjected, "What about the financial data Ms. Morgan provided?" "If we're hemorrhaging money," Marcus responded with a calm but passionate tone, "we're not hemorrhaging, we're investing. My late wife, Elizabeth, initiated these programs to ensure Sterling Enterprises stood for more than profits. We can reorganize other aspects, but I strongly urge we keep the pediatric fund intact." Claire watched the board members exchange glances. Some looked swayed by Marcus's plea, others skeptical. Ava exhaled through her nose, crossing her arms. "We need a vote, now." A hush fell as each shareholder voiced an opinion. To Claire's relief, many recognized the long-standing success and positive branding the philanthropic work had brought. A final tally landed in Marcus's favor by a narrow margin, enough to preserve the pediatric fund with minimal cuts. Ava's displeasure was evident in the tightness of her jaw. "Very well," she said, voice clipped. "It appears the board wishes to maintain the fund." A forced smile twisted her lips. "Congratulations." Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said simply, though his gaze remained guarded, as if anticipating another strike from Ava. When the meeting adjourned, the tension in the room dissipated only slightly. On the elevator ride down, Claire felt a swell of pride for Marcus's victory. Yet the silence between them weighed heavy. Outside, they found Gregory waiting with the car. He smiled broadly. "I take it we still have our fund." Marcus gave a muted nod. "Yes, for now." They stepped into the car. As Gregory drove away from the skyscrapers, Marcus finally turned to Claire. "I'm glad you were there, thank you." She met his gaze. "Marcus, about the other day." He held up a hand. "Let's talk at home. Lily might need us. And I need to figure out how to accept this news about you and Elizabeth." Claire bit her lip, nodding. The ride back was silent, but no longer hostile, rather weighed by a sense of mutual respect and unsaid apologies. Upon arriving at the mansion, they found Lily awake and painting at the dining room table, a large sheet of paper spread out. She beamed, beckoning them closer. "Look, I made a picture of a butterfly garden, just like yesterday." Marcus crouched beside her. "It's beautiful, Lily." His voice cracked slightly, emotion getting the better of him. Claire stood behind Lily's chair, heart brimming with affection. She sensed the lines between them all might finally converge in an honest way. For the first time in days, hope glimmered in Marcus's eyes when he looked at her. That evening, after Lily was tucked in bed, Marcus led Claire to the study. He motioned to Elizabeth's diary on the desk, the same one Claire had pored over. "I think we need to go through this together," he said quietly. She offered a trembling nod, tears threatening to surface. "I'm ready." As they opened the diary side by side, reading Elizabeth's words of longing for her lost sister, Both felt the profound bonds linking them. Grief mingled with relief, sorrow with joy, culminating in a promise of a brighter tomorrow. Though they carried scars and secrets, the family they were building, Lily, Marcus, and Claire, represented a chance for healing and love, extending Elizabeth's legacy far beyond her tragic end. In that final moment, the mansion felt more like a home than it ever had. And as the hush of night settled in, Marcus and Claire recognized that, through honesty and shared hope, they had forged a new beginning, one that honored the past while embracing the future with open hearts. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.